Chapter 1411. Fight for Doubting. Following White Robe's declaration, the doubting powerhouses under him also declared their allegiance. In the doubting, White Robe's prestige was second only to the Dao ancestor, especially in the celestial abyss, where his White Robe army was invincible. And these people were even more loyal to White Robe than to the Dao ancestor. With White Robe and the others' submission, the entire doubting was now truly under Zhou Xian's control. At this time Luo Ho and the others walked over. He looked at Zhou Xian and smiled. Congratulations. The current Zhou Xian could be said to be on equal footing with the Dao Tomb land. No, with Zhou Xian's participation, the doubting's strength could completely suppress the Dao Tomb land. Zhou Xian smiled. Senior Luo Ho, the cooperation I've discussed with the Dao Tomb land is still valid. Luo Ho's heart immediately relaxed. He smiled. That's good. Zhou Xian looked up into the depths of the starry sky and said softly, To doubting. He did not forget that Zhao Jiqing had left him a surprise in the 34th heaven. Soon Zhou Xian left the 5th dimension with everyone and headed for the doubting. In the starry sky, Luo Ho and the others watched Zhou Xian and the others leave with complicated expressions. They never imagined that Zhou Xian would directly become the master of the doubting. Fortunately, Zhou Xian did not become enemies with the Dao Tomb land. Otherwise, the Dao Tomb land would be in an awkward situation. After a moment, Luo Ho said, Let's go. With that, he turned and left with Qi Yaoyao and the others. Doubting. Zhou Xian once again came to the doubting. Unlike before, this time he came openly. Zhou Xian headed straight for the 34th level of heaven. On the way, Zhou Xian suddenly asked, Do you know what's inside the 34th heaven? Beside Zhou Xian, Venerated Me shook his head. We only know that it is the place where the Great Dao Seal is stored. We don't know anything else. Zhou Xian looked at Venerable Me. You've never been inside? Venerable Me nodded. I've never entered before. Zhou Xian was puzzled. Why? Venerable Me hesitated for a moment and said, I wouldn't dare to disturb you, ancestor. Upon hearing this, Zhou Xian understood. In the hearts of the doubting people, Zhao Jiqing's position was still very high. Soon Zhou Xian arrived at the entrance to the 34th heaven. Back then Sister Nian had come here but she hadn't entered. Now that he thought about it, Sister Nian must have felt Zhao Jiqing's presence. Sister Nian's strength was definitely not weaker than Zhao Jiqing's, but at that time, Sister Nian only had less than 30% of her strength. Moreover, Sister Nian's main target was the Dao ancestor. Zhou Xian collected his thoughts and walked towards the 34th heaven. Venerable Me and the rest did not follow. Soon Zhou Xian arrived at the 34th heaven. The entire 34th heaven was empty. There was nothing there. Zhou Xian was stunned. Could it be that Zhao Jiqing was lying to him? At this moment, not far from Zhou Xian, the space suddenly trembled. Then a black box floated out of the space. The box. Zhou Xian's expression was a little strange. Could this box also contain a little white guy? Zhou Xian opened the box. Inside the box was a circular black and white seal. The seal was half black and half white. Zhou Xian picked up the seal and studied it. He frowned. What was this thing? Zhou Xian studied it for a long time but still could not figure it out. Hence he picked up the seal and left the 34th heaven. Zhou Xian handed the seal to Venerable Me. This is. When he saw the black and white seal, this chapter is not finished. Please flip the page. When the seal appeared, Venerable Me's expression changed. Zhou Xian knew that Venerable Me recognized this black and white seal. Venerable Me said solemnly, This is a Dao seal. Dao seal? Zhou Xian was curious. What is a Dao seal? Venerable Me looked at Zhou Xian with a complicated expression. A Dao seal? Zhou Xian asked again, What's its use? Venerable Me hesitated and shook his head. I don't know either. Zhou Xian was speechless. After talking for so long, this guy still did not know the use of this Dao seal. Venerable Me said again, Although I don't know the use of this item, it is my doubting treasure. It has a spirit. Young friend, why don't you communicate with it? Perhaps you will gain something. The spirit of the Dao seal. Zhou Xian nodded. He looked at the Dao seal. Let's talk? No response. Zhou Xian smiled. Then he put the Dao seal back into the box. At this moment, an angry voice came from the box. Let me out. Zhou Xian smirked. He opened the box and the Dao seal floated out. At the same time, a little boy floated out from the Dao seal. The little boy looked about 5 or 6 years old. He had a pigtail and looked very cute. Yi Xian looked at the little boy. How should I address you? The little boy looked at Yi Xian and did not speak. Yi Xian smiled. I'm Yi Xian. What about you? The little boy snorted. I'm not telling you. Yi Xian laughed. I know even if you don't tell me. You're little Yin, right? The little boy frowned. How did you know? Yi Xian's expression froze. Damn, this guy is really called Little Yin? Who gave him that name? He's as good as me. Little Yin looked at Yi Xian. Why did you call me out? Yi Xian blinked and smiled. I just wanted to ask. Are you strong? Little Yin snorted. Of course I'm strong. Yi Xian pointed at Venerated Me. Can you beat him? Venerated Me. Little Yin looked at Venerated Me. He hesitated and shook his head. I can't beat him. Yi Xian chuckled. Looks like you're not that strong after all. Little Yin immediately said angrily, Who said that? Let me tell you. I'm very, very strong. Yi Xian shrugged and did not speak. But his expression said, I don't believe you. Little Yin suddenly put his palms together. The next moment he turned into a black light and entered between Yi Xian's brows. Boom. Yi Xian's body trembled violently. The next moment, a powerful aura swept out from his body. This aura was so strong that Venerated Me and the others around him were forced to retreat. In an instant the doubting experts around Yi Xian were sent flying thousands of feet away. A huge black and white Tai Chi diagram appeared beneath Yi Xian's feet. At this moment Yi Xian was a little confused. What the hell was this? Little Yin suddenly said, You fight him. Yi Xian looked at Venerated Me in the distance. He opened his palm and the Executing Heaven Sword appeared. As soon as the Executing Heaven Sword appeared, a Tai Chi diagram appeared above Venerated Me's head. With the appearance of this Tai Chi diagram, Venerated Me's realm was suppressed to Dao Defense Realm. From Dao Attainment Realm to Dao Defense Realm. Meanwhile Yi Xian's aura skyrocketed. Although he did not directly reach Dao Attainment Realm, his aura skyrocketed endlessly. It was infinitely close to the Dao Defense Realm. It wasn't just Yi Xian who was stunned, everyone else here was as well. What the hell is this? Why is it so abnormal? Meanwhile Venerated Me spoke abruptly. This chapter isn't finished. Please continue to the next page. I understand. It's used for support. Yi Xian fell silent. He understood it now. The seal of the Grand Dao was a divine treasure of support. It could suppress his opponents and strengthen himself. He didn't have to fear Dao Attainment Realm experts anymore with it in his possession. Or it should be said that Dao Attainment Realm experts should be afraid of him. Meanwhile Little Yin grunted coldly, I'm amazing, right? Yi Xian smiled, amazing. Extremely amazing. Little Yin left Yi Xian and gazed at Yi Xian. Can you let me go? Yi Xian blinked and said, Can't you leave by yourself? Little Yin lowered his head slightly. You have that seal on you. Yi Xian understood. The seal of a god. The seal was bound by the seal of a god. He tried to contact the seal of a god and sure enough he sensed Little Yin through it. Xiao Yin continued, That woman, she used that broken seal to trap me. As he spoke he gazed at Yi Xian. Can you let me go? Yi Xian didn't speak. He just opened his palm and some violet energy appeared in his hand. Little Yin's eyes lit up when he saw the violet energy and he blinked. Can you give it to me? Yi Xian smiled. Of course. As soon as he finished speaking he pointed with a finger, and the violet energy surged towards Little Yin. Little Yin instantly revealed an intoxicated expression after absorbing the violet energy, and then he gazed at Yi Xian. Do you have more? Yi Xian said with a smile, No more today. Little Yin blinked. You mean there will be more tomorrow? Yi Xian gave him a thumbs up. Smart. How about this, you follow me and I'll give you 30 strands of this violet energy every day, what do you think? Little Yin hesitated and then said, Do you want me to follow you and help you fight? Yi Xian nodded. I want you to follow me but not to help me fight. You follow me and when I'm in trouble you just need to help me a little, what do you think? Little Yin looked at Yi Xian. Let me think about it, okay? Yi Xian smiled. I'll give you 50 strands of violet energy every day. On top of that I'll give you 1,000 fortune divine crystals every day. As he spoke he took out a pile of fortune divine crystals and placed them in front of Little Yin. He knew that the fortune divine crystal was useful to these spiritual beasts. Little Yin glanced at the fortune divine crystals and he was very tempted. Yi Xian smiled. I'm a good person and I don't usually fight. Revered me, little Yin looked at Yi Xian and he was still a little hesitant. Yi Xian suddenly took out a stick of Tonghulu and handed it to little Yin. Little Yin was a little curious. What is this? Yi Xian opened the parchment and then handed it to little Yin. Lick it. Little Yin hesitated and then licked the Tonghulu. Soon his eyes widened in disbelief. What is this? Yi Xian said with a straight face. Tonghulu. Little Yin licked it again and he was very excited, or rather a little emotional, because he had never eaten something like this before. A moment later little Yin looked at Yi Xian and said excitedly, I can follow you, but you have to give me a stick of Tonghulu every day. Yi Xian, seeing that Yi Xian did not speak, little Yin hurriedly said, half will do. Half a stick no less. Yi Xian, at the side, revered me and the others could not bear to watch anymore. Yi Xian devoid of conscience. P.S. Monthly ticket. I don't want it. End of this chapter. Chapter 14:12. Just like that, Yi Xian had succeeded in leaving behind the seal. And with the existence of this seal, the current Yi Xian could be said to not be afraid of Dao realm powerhouses at all. After subduing the seal, Yi Xian looked up. There were 2 more levels after the 34th level. There were a total of 36 levels. What would the last 2 levels contain? Meanwhile, Venerated Me seemed to have read Yi Xian's mind and he said abruptly, Daoist Master, the spirit tablets of our doubting ancestors are all within the 35 levels, and it's also their resting place. There's nothing else. As for the 36 levels, there's a super formation within them. It's our doubting sect's protective formation, and it'll only be activated when the doubting sect is in danger. Yi Xian looked at Venerated Me. There aren't any other treasures? Venerated Me laughed bitterly. There really isn't. Yi Xian nodded slightly. Then forget it. With that he turned around and left. Meanwhile, Venerated Me suddenly said, Daoist Master, aren't you going to be doubting? Yi Xian glanced at them and smiled. How about this? I won't be the doubting master and all of you can make the doubting decisions yourselves. What do you think? Everyone was stunned when they heard that. Venerated Me hurriedly said, absolutely not. Since the ancestor made you the Daoist master, then you are the Daoist master. No one can change that. Doubting ancestor? What kind of person was that? Since she made Yi Xian the doubting master, then there was definitely a deeper meaning behind it. Moreover, after interacting with Yi Xian, they realized that Yi Xian really wasn't simple. If Yi Xian didn't become the doubting master now, then the doubting sect would be without a leader, and its future would be worrying. Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, all of you will listen to what I say, right? Venerable Me quickly nodded. Of course. Yi Xian looked at Venerable Me. I want to rebuild the order of heaven and earth, but doubting all of us have to make changes. Venerable Me hesitated and said, that's a good thing, but... Yi Xian suddenly asked, Venerable Me, do you know why my sister Lord Qing is so powerful? Venerable Me looked at Yi Xian. Why? Yi Xian walked in front of Venerable Me and said softly, because she has not forgotten her original intention. Venerable Me, you are also a guardian of the great Tao, but do you know that your path has gone astray? If I'm not wrong, you have not been in contact with the God's seal in your body for many years? Venerable Me was silent. The God's seal did not leave, but it had been dormant for many years. However, he did not care about it. With his current strength, he basically did not need to use the God's seal. Yi Xian looked at Venerable Me. Senior, do you know why those in the past were able to reach Tao realization, but you all were stuck at Tao realization, unable to advance? Venerable Me slowly clenched his fists. It's a matter of faith. Yi Xian nodded. When Lord Qing came out, he said something that Senior should remember. That is, in the end things have changed. Senior should know the meaning of this, right? Venerable Me was silent. Of course he knew. This meant that the doubting of today was no longer the doubting of the past. Yi Xian looked at Venerable Me. Rebuild order. Let the 3,000 Daos shine again. Let the world have order again. Senior, if Lord Qing and the others could do it, why can't we? He knew that if he wanted to truly control doubting, he needed the support of Venerable Me and the other two. This was because the 3 of them were Dao attainment realm cultivators from the Dao court. With their support, anything he wanted to do would be simple. Venerable Me was silent for a long time. Then he said, I understand Dao Master's meaning. Whatever Dao Master wants to do, do it. The 3 of us will support you with all our strength. Yi Xian nodded. That's good. Saying so, he looked around. Senior, what do you think of the fifth dimension? Venerable Me said solemnly, very good. Yi Xian smiled. I want to start with the fifth dimension. To establish a relatively fair order in the fifth dimension, what do you think? Venerable Me thought about it. That's not a problem. However, to re-establish order, I'm afraid it'll be a bit difficult. Yi Xian smiled. It's not difficult. As long as we work together, it's not difficult at all. Venerable Me wanted to say something but stopped. Yi Xian smiled. Does Senior want to say that it might affect some people's interests? Venerable Me nodded. Currently, the Dao court was fighting for themselves. If they were to establish order now, it would be equivalent to fighting for others. Moreover, they would definitely have to give up some things. Many people would definitely be unwilling to do so. Yi Xian looked at Venerable Me. If they're not like-minded, then ask them to leave. Hearing this, Venerable Me's heart trembled. He nodded. Understood. Yi Xian glanced at everyone present and then he said, everyone head to the fifth dimension. At the side, White Robe suddenly said. Heaven Abyss. Yi Xian looked at White Robe. No. White Robe was stunned. Yi Xian turned and left. In the future I will give you salaries. Everyone's salaries will be doubled. Everyone was stunned when they heard this. Double the increase. Is this true? Everyone looked at each other. Just like that, all the doubting powerhouses headed to the fifth dimension. In the fifth dimension, Yi Xian asked Guanyin to build a Dao city. This Dao city was filled with doubting powerhouses. As for Heaven Abyss, the doubting completely withdrew and gave Heaven Abyss to the Dao tomb. This caused the Dao tomb to be slightly stunned. What was Yi Xian doing? After returning to the fifth dimension, Yi Xian immediately called Sanxing Guanyin, and Venerable Me Yi Xian looked at Sanxing. Sanxing, are you willing to return to the underworld? Sanxing was stunned. Then he shook his head. This place is quite fun. Yi Xian smiled. If you don't want to go back, then forget it. Saying this, he looked at Venerable Me. Venerable Me, who do you think should guard the underworld? To rebuild order, the underworld was crucial. Venerable Me thought about it. To rebuild the underworld, we need a trustworthy person. Moreover, this person's ability must be outstanding. Yi Xian looked at Guanyin. In fact, Guan Yin's ability was good, but she was not suitable. Her strength was still lacking. Moreover, this side needed Guanyin. If Guanyin left, this side would be in chaos. Venerable Me suddenly said. I have a candidate, but I'm afraid you, Yi Xian asked. Who? Venerable Me said in a deep voice. Bai Dizzy. Hearing this, Yi Xian was stunned. He had almost forgotten about this old man. Damn, this old man was definitely capable. However, he did not have a good impression of this old man. Venerable Me said, as the head of the Celestial Lords, Bai Dizzy has been helping the previous Dao ancestor manage the doubting. If he were to manage the underworld, it would be a piece of cake for him. Yi Xian thought about it. Then he said, choose someone else. Venerable Me was stunned. He looked at Yi Xian and did not speak. Yi Xian smiled. With his talent, it is a waste of his talent to manage the underworld. Hearing this, Venerable Me heaved a sigh of relief. He thought that Yi Xian wanted to kill Bai Dizzy. Venerable Me said, then let Sir God Yin Ming go to the underworld. He was once the liaison between the doubting and the underworld, so he is familiar with the underworld. Moreover, he is strong enough. Yi Xian nodded. All right. As he spoke, he looked at Sanxing. Sanxing, the spirit of the underworld is following you, right? Sanxing's expression changed slightly. She hurriedly shook her head. No, no. Yi Xian said with a smile. Really? Sanxing said softly. Can you let her go? Yi Xian smiled. I won't kill her. I need her help. Sanxing blinked. What help? Yi Xian said. Let her return to the underworld. If there is no spirit of the underworld, will it still be called the underworld? Sanxing hesitated for a moment. I don't know if she will go back. Yi Xian smiled. She will definitely go back. Because the underworld is her home. Sanxing nodded. I'll talk to her. But if she doesn't want to go back, you can't force her. Yi Xian said with a smile. Great. Sanxing turned and left. At this moment, Yi Xian asked again, Venerable Me, do you know where Bai Dizzy is? Venerable Me nodded. I do. Yi Xian said, how about this? Tell him to do something for me. Venerable Me asked, what is it? Yi Xian said, ask him to help find those with the god seal. Find them and bring them back. As long as they are willing to return, they will receive a monthly salary. Venerable Mi smiled. That won't be a problem. He's in charge of the doubting. He's the best when it comes to these messy matters. Yi Xian nodded. Go do what you need to do. Venerable Mi bowed slightly and turned to leave. Only Yi Xian and Guan Yin were left in the hall. Guan Yin said in a deep voice, you really want to establish order? Yi Xian nodded. Guan Yin was puzzled. Why? Yi Xian said softly, the current fifth dimension is so harmonious because of me. But what if I'm not there? Guan Yin was silent. Without Yi Xian, the fifth dimension would be in chaos. Because no one could suppress it. Yi Xian said softly, I want to establish order. An order that everyone follows. Even without me, the fifth dimension will not be in chaos. At least not for a certain period of time. Of course, there's nothing wrong with a new order. At least this world will become a better place. If it was in the past, he would definitely not do this. But now he was willing to do it. Because the fifth dimension was the universe that Sister Nian was protecting. He, Yi Xian, wanted to protect the fifth dimension. Protecting the fifth dimension was equivalent to protecting Sister Nian. He had promised Sister Nian. Ancient God Abyss. After Suku returned to the ancient God Abyss at the top of a pyramid, Suja looked at Suku. You're saying that the people from the Dark Abyss want to kill Yi Xian? Suku nodded. Yes. Young Master Yi not only has the Tao scripture, but he's also related to Situ Tingyun from the Sword Sect. And the Dark Abyss has a blood feud with Situ Tingyun, so... Suja suddenly laughed. The Dark Abyss. This old man is dying from laughter. No, let's take a break. Ha. Suku. Chapter 14-13. In the fifth dimension. In the sword hall, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground, stabilizing his realm. He had reached the Tao controlling realm during the battle, but his realm was still unstable. What he needed to do now was to stabilize his realm and familiarize himself with the Tao controlling realm. After reaching the Tao controlling realm, he felt that the greatest improvement was in his body. This was something he had not expected. He was now at the Tao controlling realm and his body was also at the Tao controlling realm. It could be said that he could fight Tao attainment realm experts without using any external items. With the addition of that strange Tao seal, he now had the ability to kill a Tao attainment realm expert. In the hall, as Yi Xian stabilized his realm, his aura became more and more stable. In the end, his aura disappeared and he seemed to have merged with heaven and earth. After the doubting entered the fifth dimension was unprecedentedly powerful. In addition, the spirit qi in the entire fifth dimension was getting denser. This was because the fifth dimension didn't just have the spirit qi of heaven and earth. There were also the super mineral veins that Yi Xian brought from the dark world. These super mineral veins were not only used to produce fortune crystals but also contained extremely pure spirit qi. With these mineral veins, the spirit qi in the fifth dimension became even denser. Of course, there was another reason why the spirit qi in the fifth dimension was so dense. It was because the experts of the fifth dimension were protecting it. In the fifth dimension, destroying spirit qi in origin was a serious crime. In short, the fifth dimension was better than ever. In the Tao tomb, the Lord and the others gathered. The Lord glanced at Luo Ho and the others and said with a smile, Yi Xian has taken over the Tao court completely. He also asked the people of the Tao court to withdraw from the celestial abyss. Now the celestial abyss is in our hands. Bitter King said solemnly, this is a good thing. The Lord smiled. It is indeed a good thing. At this moment, Qin Yaoyao suddenly said, can Yi Xian really establish order? The Lord looked at Qin Yaoyao and smiled. What do you think? Qin Yaoyao said solemnly, I think so. The Lord asked, how so? Qin Yaoyao said softly, because he is strong enough. And his backer is very strong. Backer. The surroundings suddenly fell silent when they heard this. Now, not only did Yi Xian have the support of the people behind him, but he also had the support of the doubting ancestors. Meanwhile, Qi Yaoyao continued, if he attains the Tao formation realm, then I think that very few in the Tao formation realm would be a match for him. Luo Ho frowned slightly. He just reached the Tao defense realm. Qian Yaoyao shook her head. In this world, some people can't be judged by common sense. Luo Ho was silent. Just as Yan Yaoyao had said, some people couldn't be judged by common sense. For example, Yi Xian's life was like cheating. comparing oneself to others would really anger one to death. Qi Yaoyao continued, what we have to think about now is if Yi Xian really establishes order. At that time should we obey his order? At the side, Bitter King frowned slightly. He's building his own. What does that have to do with us? Yao Yao smiled and didn't say anything. Luo Ho spoke solemnly, at that time I'm afraid it won't be up to us. Meanwhile, the Lord suddenly smiled and said, actually establishing a completely new order isn't a bad thing. Of course, it might not be very difficult for him to establish a completely new order. However, he has to deal with two things first. Yan Yaoyao spoke solemnly, the dark abyss and the whirling world. The Lord nodded. The dark abyss saved the Dao ancestors. Obviously, they've chosen to interfere. As for the whirling world, I believe that they'll definitely not give up on this scripture. They would definitely not give up on this scripture. After all, Yi Xian already had 6 scrolls with him. If they could get Yi Xian's 6 scrolls, they would have 7 scrolls in total. So if I'm not wrong, the whirling world has probably sent someone over. Luo Ho gazed at the Lord. What about us? What should we do now? The Lord smiled and said, nothing. We'll just wait and see. So long as we wait and see, then no matter if it's Yi Xian, the whirling world, or the dark abyss, none of them will come looking for trouble with us. At this point he smiled faintly. Of course we can provide some help to Yi Xian. Luo Ho looked at the Lord. The Lord is still optimistic about Yi Xian. The Lord smiled. Why not? Do you think it's just luck that a person with the calamity seed could survive until now? Luo Ho was silent. The Lord smiled. Don't forget one person. Moon Yen Yen. Moon Yen Yen. The expressions of everyone here changed when they heard this. They almost forgot about this woman. This woman had been reborn. Although she had lost her memories and strength, what if she regained her memories? After all, the 5th dimension no longer needed her to suppress it. Once she regained her memories, she would have all her strength. In that state, how many people in the world could be a match for Moon Yen Yen? Luo Ho said softly, so the dark abyss and the whirling world won't give Yi Xian too much time. The Lord suddenly stood up. This is not something we should worry about. I want to take a stroll in the 5th dimension. Are you interested? Luo Ho hesitated. Then let's go. The Lord smiled. Let's go. At this point he left with everyone else. In a certain part of the starry sky, the originally calm starry sky suddenly trembled. It didn't take long for the space there to split open, and then an old man and a woman in a green dress walked out from within. Both of their faces were slightly pale. The old man looked around and said softly, it really wasn't easy to come to this place. The woman in green slowly closed her eyes. Her aura was very unstable because traveling through the starry sky had consumed too much of her mind and strength. After a while, the woman in green returned to normal. The old man smiled. How do you feel? The woman in green's expression was cold. Good. The old man nodded, looked into the distance and said softly, I haven't been to this universe for many years. The woman in green said, Elder, can you feel the aura of Yi Xian? The old man slowly closed his eyes. After a while he looked to the right. He is in the 5th dimension. The woman in green said, then let's go. The old man shook his head. The woman in green looked at the old man and the old man said in a deep voice, Girl, don't look down on this person. Although we haven't had any dealings with him, he is definitely not an ordinary person since he has 5 Dao scriptures. The woman in green was expressionless. I am not looking down on him, but I feel that he is not qualified for me to pay attention to him. The old man shook his head. Girl, there is always someone better than you. Be careful in everything you do. The woman in green did not speak. The old man sighed, feeling helpless. The woman in front of him was one of the 3 great evildoers of the Saga world. She indeed had the qualifications to be arrogant. However, this Yi Xian was able to collect 5 Dao scriptures, so he was definitely not an ordinary person. The reason he could live until now, besides his own strength, was also because of his cautiousness. Be careful in everything. At this time the woman in green suddenly said, Elder, let's go meet that Yi Xian. The elder nodded. Let's go meet him. He was also a little curious about this Yi Xian. He was actually able to collect 2 Dao scriptures. Soon the 2 disappeared into the starry sky. In the 5th dimension, the door to Yi Xian's room was tightly shut. During this period of time he had been cultivating in seclusion, and no one came to disturb him. It was worth mentioning that more and more people in the fifth dimension had broken through to the Dao validation realm. Because this time he had the help of the doubting. As one of the top forces, the doubting could not be compared to the current fifth dimension in terms of nurturing people. This was because the doubting had inheritance. In the fifth dimension there was nothing. If it was not for Yi Xian's wealth, even Xianxia and the others could not reach the Dao validation realm, let alone others. And the most evildoer Xiaoqi had already begun to break through to the Dao defense realm. As for Xiaoqi's talent, even experts like the doubting were very shocked. It was too terrifying. It could be said that Xiaoqi's talent was not inferior to Yi Xian's at all. In a hall somewhere, Venerable Me, who was resting with his eyes closed, suddenly opened his eyes. The next moment he disappeared on the spot, and when he reappeared he was already in the starry sky. In front of him stood an old man and a woman in green. Seeing Venerable Me, the old man smiled. "You are?" Venerable Me asked. "The two of you are?" The old man smiled. "The two of us are from the whirling world. This time we came to meet young Master Yi." The whirling world. Venerable Me's heart sank. He knew that this force would appear sooner or later, but he did not expect it to appear so soon. The old man smiled. "Is that okay?" Venerable Me glanced at the two of them and then said, "I'll go ask the Dao Master." With that he turned and left. At this moment the old man suddenly said, "Dao Master?" Venerable Me glanced at the old man. "He is now the Dao Master of my doubting." With that he turned and disappeared in the starry sky. The Dao Master. The old man frowned slightly. Yi Xian has actually become the master of the doubting. Didn't the information we gathered say that Yi Xian and the doubting are mortal enemies? The woman in green looked down and remained silent. No one knew what she was thinking. Meanwhile, Venerable Me appeared once more in the starry sky, and he glanced at the two of them. "The Dao Master invites you in." As soon as he finished speaking, he gestured for them to enter. The old man nodded slightly. "Please lead the way." Venerable Me nodded, and then he turned around and left. The two of them followed Venerable Me. Under Venerable Me's lead, the two of them arrived at Sword Hall, and only Yi Xian was there. Looking at the two old men, Yi Xian said with a smile, "Please take a seat." The old man smiled. "Young Master Yi, I've heard a lot about you." Yi Xian grinned. "You must be joking." The old man continued, "Old man, let's get straight to the point. I heard that young Master Yi has 5 Daoist scriptures." Yi Xian nodded. "Yes." The old man smiled. "Young Master Yi, those Daoist scriptures belong to my whirling sect. I wonder if young Master Yi can return them?" "They belong to the whirling sect." Yi Xian blinked. "Are you sure?" The old man said seriously, "They do indeed belong to my whirling sect. Young Master Yi, please return them." Yi Xian sighed softly. "You're too late." The old man frowned. "What do you mean?" Yi Xian said seriously, "The 5 Daoist scriptures have been taken by the Dark World." Venerable Me. Chapter 14:14. The Dark World has taken it. In the hall, the old man frowned at Yi Xian's words. "Really?" Yi Xian nodded. "Really. If you check, you'll find out that the former Dao ancestor has joined forces with the Dark World. They have many Dao scriptures now. If you want them, you can go to the Dark World." The old man fell silent. The woman spoke abruptly. "I heard you're the #1 genius in this universe?" Yi Xian looked at her and smiled. "You must be joking." The woman looked at Yi Xian. "Shall we spar?" Yi Xian hurriedly shook his head. "No, no." The woman frowned. "Why?" Yi Xian laughed bitterly. "How can a place like this compare to the whirling world? The #1 genius here is probably a joke in the eyes of the whirling world." He paused for a moment and continued, "Moreover, your aura is thick. I'm afraid you've attained the Dao realm, right?" The woman glanced at Yi Xian and nodded slightly. Yi Xian's expression instantly turned solemn, and he cupped his fists. It's truly rare to see someone who has attained the Dao realm at such a young age. The woman's expression was calm. Even though there aren't many young Dao realm cultivators in the whirling world, there are quite a few. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, "May I know when you attained the Dao?" The woman looked at Yi Xian. "I attained the Dao imperial realm at the age of 16, attained the Dao at the age of 18, and I'm 20 now." Yi Xian was stunned, and then he said with astonishment, "Attained the Dao at the age of 18? The woman nodded. "Yes. Why do you look so shocked?" Yi Xian laughed bitterly. Miss, I didn't even attain the Tao at the age of 18. There's always someone better out there. The woman glanced at Yi Xian. Don't be discouraged, you're not bad yourself. Yi Xian shook his head repeatedly. In this universe I might be considered good, but if I were to be placed in your world I'm afraid I'm nothing. The green-robed woman's lips moved but she didn't know what to say. She was really not good at comforting people. At the side the old man glanced at Yi Xian. No one knew what he was thinking. Venerable Me also glanced at Yi Xian with an odd expression. At this time Yi Xian looked at the green-robed woman. May I know your name? The woman hesitated for a moment before she said, Xian Chu. Yi Xian cupped his fists and said, Miss Xian Chu, if you don't mind, I would like to ask you some questions about the martial Tao. Xian Chu looked at the old man. The old man smiled and said, Young Master Yi, since the Tao scripture is not in your hands, then we will have to leave. If there's a chance in the future the two of you can discuss it. Yi Xian sighed softly with a downcast expression. Xian Chu glanced at Yi Xian and was about to speak when the old man suddenly said, Young Master Yi, we will be leaving now. With that he turned around and left with Xian Chu. At this moment Yi Xian hurriedly said, Miss, please wait. Xian Chu looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian walked quickly to Xian Chu and he hesitated for a moment before he said, Miss Xian Chu, will you be coming back? Xian Chu, Venerable Me. At the side the old man glanced at Yi Xian with a slightly unsightly expression. Damn it, this kid has ulterior motives. Xian Chu was about to speak when the old man suddenly said, Young Master Yi, we won't be coming back. His tone was very flat and carried a trace of coldness. Yi Xian was stunned and then he looked at Xian Chu. He was about to speak when the old man suddenly said, Young Master Yi, we have matters to attend to. Farewell. With that he left with Xian Chu. Yi Xian still wanted to say something but the old man disappeared with Xian Chu. Yi Xian was stunned and a moment later he turned to look at Venerable Me. Am I very scary? Venerable Me hesitated. A little. At this moment he was quite emotional. No wonder Bai Dizzy couldn't defeat this fellow. This fellow was really shameless. In fact, he was quite impressed with Yi Xian because Yi Xian had resolved this crisis with just a few words. At least it was temporarily resolved. At this moment Yi Xian suddenly left the hall. Outside the hall, Nian Nian appeared beside Yi Xian. Nian Nian turned to look at Yi Xian and giggled. Where are we going to play today? Yi Xian laughed. You decide. Nian Nian blinked. Roast fish first. Hearing that, Yi Xian instantly burst into laughter. Roast fish. In next to no time, Yi Xian took Nian Nian's hand and vanished into the distance. Xian Chu and the old man looked down from the starry sky and no one knew what they were thinking. The old man suddenly said, Xian Chu, do you believe that scripture is in the hands of the dark world? Xian Chu spoke softly, it should be true. The old man was quite puzzled. Why? Xian Chu looked down and said, he doesn't seem like someone who would lie. The old man was speechless. Xian Chu continued, should we go to the dark world? The old man shook his head. The dark world isn't like the fifth dimension. It isn't that simple. Xian Chu gazed at the old man. Wait. The old man thought for a moment and said, wait for me to investigate and understand the ins and outs of the matter. Xian Chu nodded. All right. The old man glanced at Xian Chu, hesitated for a moment and said, little girl, what do you think of Yi Xian? Xian Chu gazed at the old man. Elder, why do you ask? The old man replied, I'm just asking. Xian Chu fell silent for a moment before he said, he's a good person. The old man's face fell. Little girl, in my opinion Yi Xian might not be a good person. Moreover, he's quite flashy, so you have to be careful. Xian Chu's expression was calm. Elder, what are you trying to say? The old man hesitated for a moment before he said, little girl, you're the most monstrous genius of my whirling sect and you're the next sect master. Of course, this doesn't mean that you have to be heartless. However, the person you choose must be a genius favored by the heavens. But this Yi Xian. As he spoke, he shook his head. Even though this Yi Xian isn't particularly bad, he isn't worthy of you. Xian Chu gazed at the old man. Elder, aren't you overthinking things? The old man sighed in a low voice. I'm not overthinking things. It's just that this Yi Xian is clearly a playboy. No matter what, Xian Chu should avoid interacting with him. Xian Chu gazed down with a calm expression. Elder, someone who was able to become a Tao Lord and manage the fifth dimension so well can't be too bad. As she spoke, she gazed at the old man. Elder, don't judge a person from a one-sided perspective. The old man laughed bitterly. Little girl, I'm not looking down on him. It's just that he's flashy and he's intentionally trying to curry favor with you. I think. Xianxia shook her head. Elder, in your opinion he's trying to curry favor with me. But in my opinion he's a humble and low-profile person. The old man was speechless. Xianxia continued. Elder, don't forget that he's a swordsman. A swordsman. The old man fell silent. Needless to say, this swordsman wasn't quite like the swordsman he'd imagined. Right at this moment, a figure suddenly appeared in front of the old man and Xianxia. It was Dark World's Lianzun. Lianzun cupped his fists and smiled. You two should be from the Whirling World, right? The old man looked at Lianzun. Dark World? Lianzun smiled. Yes. The old man was expressionless. What's the matter? Lianzun nodded. Your Excellency, why don't we cooperate? The old man frowned. Cooperate? Lianzun smiled. That Yi Xian isn't simple. Not only does he have a mysterious expert behind him, but he also has a relationship with the ancient god Abyss. Most importantly, the old man suddenly interrupted Lianzun. Isn't the Tao scripture in your Dark World's hands? Lianzun was stunned. Who said that? The old man said. Yi Xian. Yi Xian. Lianzun, the old man continued. Why isn't it in your doubting hands? Lianzun said in a deep voice. To tell you the truth, my Dark World has 2 Tao scriptures and that Yi Xian has 6. The old man frowned. He said you took them all. Lianzun shook his head. He's ting. The old man's face darkened. Yi Xian was lying? Xianxia suddenly said. You're saying he has 6 Tao scriptures? Lianzun nodded. Yes. Xianxia looked at Lianzun. Why didn't you take them? The old man looked at Xianxia. Girl, this isn't the point. The point is that Yi Xian is lying to us. Xianxia looked at the old man. Why isn't Dark World lying to us? Old man, Lianzun suddenly smiled. Looks like you don't know much about this Yi Xian. He's a famous liar. If you get to know him better, you'll know who's real and who's fake. Xianxia looked at Lianzun. If he has 6 Tao scriptures, why didn't Dark World take them? Lianzun smiled. I told you. This Yi Xian isn't simple. Xianxia asked again. You want to join forces with us to fight for the Tao scriptures? Lianzun nodded. Yes. Xianxia asked. What happens after we get the Tao scriptures? Lianzun smiled. Why don't we talk about this after we get the Tao scriptures? Xianxia didn't speak anymore. He looked at the old man. The old man said after a moment of silence, Sir, I don't know who is telling the truth between you and Yi Xian. We'll look into it. As for the cooperation, let's not talk about it for now. With that he left with Xianxia. In the starry sky, Lianzun was silent for a moment. He said softly, Yi Xian, can you be more shameless? When did Dark World snatch your Tao scriptures? Ancient God Abyss. At the top of a pyramid, Zhou suddenly said, Dark World might be up to something big recently. Besides Zhou, Suku asked in a low voice, What do you mean? Zhou turned around and said, Many powerful auras are coming out from Dark Abyss. Hearing this, Suku's face darkened. Should we stop them? Zhou shook his head. What for? Suku was puzzled. Don't stop them? Zhou slowly closed his eyes. Don't stop them. Let them continue, the more they do the better. Suku was speechless. P.S. Many readers have been saying that I'm a liar. I just want to say that you've underestimated me. What's a mere monthly ticket? I don't want it. Chapter 14-15. Suk said solemnly, You want to use the plain-dressed woman to destroy the Dark Abyss? Hearing this, Zhou opened his eyes. After a long moment of silence he said softly, We've been at a stalemate with the Dark Abyss for hundreds of thousands of years. How many people have we lost in these hundreds of thousands of years? Suku was silent. Zhou continued, For the past hundreds of thousands of years, neither of us has been able to defeat the other. But now it's time to end this long war. Suk asked solemnly, Can that senior really destroy the Dark Abyss? Zhou looked up into the starry sky. Forget about destroying the Dark Abyss. Even if the ancient god Abyss and the Dark Abyss were to join forces, we would still be no match for her. Suku's expression was grave. Is he really that strong? Zhou's eyes were clouded with confusion. You've never faced her before, You don't know how we feel when we face her. This is despair, true despair. The strength of the plainly dressed woman caused him to feel despair. At this time Zhou Xian suddenly laughed. I never imagined that an Yuan would want to kill Yi Xian. It seems like the heavens want an Yuan dead. Saying that he looked at Suku. You can contact that young Master Yi and give him some help. Suku nodded. Understood. As if he'd thought of something, Suku said, according to my knowledge, Lian Zun is investigating that woman in a plain dress. Zhou Xian laughed. Let him investigate. They won't be able to find anything anyway. Currently only the people from the ancient god abyss knew how strong the lady in the plain dress was. However, would the ancient god abyss tell an Yuan about it? Of course not. Suk continued, and the whirling world. Hearing this, Zhou Xian fell silent. Even the ancient god abyss had to take the whirling world seriously. After a while, Zhou Xian said, if young Master Yi is in danger, protect him at all costs. Suku looked at Zhou Xian. At all costs. Zhou Xian nodded. At all costs. Suku was silent. Zhou Xian said, this friend of young Master Yi, my ancient god abyss is definitely going to befriend him. Suku. Somewhere in the starry sky, Lian Zun sat cross-legged in the starry sky. His entire being seemed to be one with the starry sky. Next to him was a former Dao father. At that moment the Dao ancestor had already recovered his body. At this time, Lian Zun opened his eyes. He looked down at the fifth dimension and smiled. Dao ancestor, how do you feel now? The Dao ancestor was expressionless and did not say anything. Now that the doubting had settled in the fifth dimension, how could he feel? With the support of the doubting ancestor, no one in the doubting world would recognize him as the Dao ancestor anymore. Lian Zun suddenly said, Dao ancestor, doubting, you've investigated Yi Xian before this. Do you know who that woman in a plain dress behind him is? The Dao ancestor shook his head. I don't know. Lian Zun frowned. You don't know? The Dao ancestor nodded. This person is too mysterious. I only know that she usually only uses one sword to kill. One strike. Lian Zun chuckled. Interesting. The Dao ancestor shook his head. This woman's strength is most likely above Dao attainment. Lian Zun said softly, above Dao attainment. Can you be sure? The Dao ancestor shook his head. I'm not sure because I've never come into contact with this person before. After a moment of silence, Lian Zun said, how do we find this person? The Dao ancestor looked at Lian Zun. You want to find her? Lian Zun stood up and looked down. This person is Yi Xian's Dao protector. Naturally, I have to figure out her background and true strength. Otherwise, she will be like a thorn in my throat. Saying this, he looked at the Dao ancestor. How about it? Are you interested in meeting this person? The Dao ancestor frowned. Me. Lian Zun smiled. Yes. The Dao ancestor was silent. Lian Zun smiled. With your strength, even if you can't defeat the opponent, it shouldn't be a problem for you to escape unscathed. Of course, if you're afraid, it doesn't matter. I'll send someone else. The Dao ancestor said calmly, there's no need for someone else. I'll go myself. I also want to see how strong this person is. However, I don't know where this person is. Lian Zun said, didn't someone find her before you doubting? The Dao ancestor said in a deep voice, that's because of their talent. Now both of them are dead. Lian Zun thought about it and said, that's simple. As soon as he finished speaking, an old man suddenly appeared behind him. The old man's attire was a little gaudy. His body was covered in copper coins. In his left hand he held a long wooden staff and in his right hand he held a tortoise shell. Lian Zun smiled and said, Master, thank you. The old man nodded slightly and slowly closed his eyes. Soon the copper coins on his body began to tremble violently. Seeing that, the Dao ancestor frowned. Is this a divination technique? Lian Zun smiled and said, yes. However, it's not an ordinary divination technique. It's a divination technique from the Dark Sutra. Just as the Dao ancestor was about to speak, the old man suddenly opened his eyes. He looked into the depths of the starry sky and frowned. Lian Zun asked, what's wrong? The former master said hoarsely, it's in a very, very far place. The Dao ancestor frowned slightly. How far? The former master said in a low voice, extremely far. The Dao ancestor looked at Lian Zun. Lian Zun said softly, very far. Isn't he Yi Xian's Dao protector? Why is he so far away? Or does the other party have a motive? The Dao ancestor said in a low voice. He might have a motive. As he spoke, he looked at the former master. Can you catch up to this person? After a moment of silence, the former master said, I can try. As he spoke, he opened his palm and a black copper coin appeared in his palm. He handed the copper coin to the Dao ancestor. This item will guide you. The Dao ancestor nodded and took the copper coin. At that moment, Lian Zun suddenly said, Dao ancestor, the main purpose of finding this woman this time is to test her. If you can't defeat her, don't become enemies with her. Protecting yourself is the most important. The Dao ancestor put away the copper coin and said calmly, Don't worry. As long as I see this person, I'll know his strength. As he spoke, he paused for a moment and continued, Even if I'm not her match, if I want to escape, she can't do anything to me. I still have that much confidence. Lian Zun nodded. No matter what, it's better to be careful. The Dao ancestor nodded and did not say anything else. He turned around and left. Soon he disappeared into the vast starry sky. After the Dao ancestor left, Lian Zun suddenly looked at the former master. Is this trip ominous or auspicious? The former master was silent. Lian Zun frowned slightly. I don't know or can't say. The former master shook his head. I don't know. As he spoke, he sighed softly. I'm afraid this woman isn't that simple. Lian Zun asked. What do you mean? The former master shook his head slightly. When I was calculating this person, I always had a feeling of unease in my heart. I've never seen such a scene before. As he spoke, he raised his head and looked into the depths of the starry sky. There was a trace of worry in his eyes. I'm afraid he'll be in trouble this time. He was in trouble. Lian Zun raised his head and looked into the depths of the starry sky. He smiled and said, I'm a little curious about how strong she is. As he spoke, he seemed to have thought of something and shook his head with a smile. Killing with only one sword. It sounds very powerful. With that, he turned around and left. In the five-dimensional universe. In the Dao city, Yi Xian was strolling leisurely on the streets with Nian Nian. In her left hand she was holding a roasted fish and in her right hand she was holding a stick of candied hawthorn. Along the way, Nian Nian kept looking around curiously. Yi Xian looked at Nian Nian beside him and smiled. Actually, he didn't miss Nian to recover her memory so quickly because Nian Nian didn't have so many burdens now. She was very happy. Of course, it would be a good thing if she could recover her memory. At this moment, Nian Nian suddenly pulled Yi Xian's hand and pointed to the noodle shop not far away. Yi Xian laughed. Let's go. Let's eat some noodles. Nian Nian quickly nodded. After the two of them found a place to sit down, Yi Xian looked at the boss in the distance and said with a smile, 2 bowls of noodles. In the distance, the boss smiled and said, all right. Soon the waiter placed 2 bowls of noodles in front of the two of them. Yi Xian looked at the 2 bowls of noodles in front of him in silence. At this moment he thought of Yi Ling. Where was she now? At this moment Nian Nian suddenly said, what's wrong? Yi Xian retracted his thoughts and said with a smile, nothing. Let's eat some noodles. Nian Nian was about to speak when a woman suddenly walked to the side of the two of them. It was Xianchu. Xianchu directly sat next to Yi Xian. Yi Xian was stunned for a moment and then said with a smile, Miss Xianchu. We meet again. Xianchu looked at Yi Xian. The Dao scripture is in your hands, right? Yi Xian said with a smile. It seems that Miss Xianchu has already come into contact with the dark world. Xianchu was expressionless. Why did you lie? Yi Xian was silent. Xianchu looked at Yi Xian and asked again, why did you lie to me? Yi Xian smiled bitterly. Miss Xianchu, if you were me, what would you do? Xianchu's expression was cold and she did not speak. Yi Xian said again, you are so strong. If I did not use this method, would you and your elder let me go? Definitely not. Xianchu said, that Dao scripture belongs to the whirling sect. Yi Xian's lips curled up. Are you sure? Xianchu frowned. What do you mean? Yi Xian said with a smile, as far as I know, this Dao scripture came from the whirling world. However, it does not belong to the whirling sect, right? Xianchu shook her head. You should know that it will only bring you endless trouble if you have it. Yi Xian suddenly said, did you cooperate with the dark world? Xianchu shook her head. No. However, the elder is very likely to cooperate with them. Yi Xian suddenly said, Xianchu, why don't we cooperate? Xianchu looked at Yi Xian. We cooperate? Yi Xian nodded. We cooperate and deal with the dark world together. Xianchu looked at Yi Xian. The elder will not cooperate with you. Yi Xian was confused. Why? Xianchu said, because you are weaker than the dark world. Yi Xian, Xianchu said again, moreover you have more Dao scriptures than the dark world. Then she paused and said, can I have a look at those Dao scriptures? Yi Xian said with a smile, of course you can. After saying that, he waved his right hand and 6 Dao scriptures appeared in front of Xianchu. Xianchu was stunned. He just let him see it? Xianchu looked at Yi Xian. Why do you trust me so much? Yi Xian said with a smile, I treat you as a friend. Moreover, as the super monster of the whirling world, you will not do such a despicable thing, right? Of course if you snatch it then I Yi Xian am blind. I will admit defeat. Xianchu was silent. Chapter 14:16. Xianchu looked at Yi Xian. Are you trying to play tricks with me? Yi Xian smiled. Miss Xianchu, are the Dao scriptures in front of you fake? Xianchu looked at the 6 Dao scriptures. After a while she said softly, they are real. Yi Xian asked, then can you show me the Dao scriptures from the whirling world? Even if you're playing tricks. After a moment of silence, Xianchu lowered her head and said softly, I'm sorry, I can't show them to you. Yi Xian smiled. It doesn't matter. You can look at mine first. Xianchu hesitated and shook her head. She placed the 6 Dao scriptures back in front of Yi Xian. I'm not looking at them. With that she stood up and left. At this moment Yi Xian suddenly said, why aren't you looking at them? Xianchu stopped and looked at Yi Xian. The whirling world's Dao scriptures are the sect's most precious treasures. Without the sect leader's permission I can't show them to others. Yi Xian smiled. Because you can't show them to me you won't look at mine? Xianchu nodded. Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, aren't you curious about these Dao scriptures? Xianchu's expression was calm. I'm curious but I don't want to owe you anything. Yi Xian smiled. How about this? I'll show you these Dao scriptures and then I'll ask you some questions. Xianchu fell silent. Yi Xian smiled. Don't worry, it won't be anything difficult for you. Xianchu nodded. Sure. With that she sat opposite Yi Xian. As if noticing something she suddenly looked at Nian Nian. Nian Nian was holding a bowl and drinking soup. When she saw Xianchu looking at her she hurriedly put down the bowl and grinned. Xianchu hesitated for a moment and nodded slightly. She knew Nian Nian's identity because she had investigated Yi Xian and the 5-dimensional universe before coming here. Nian Nian giggled. Sister, do you want to eat noodles too? Xianchu shook her head. Oh, you eat. Nian Nian nodded and continued eating her noodles. Yi Xian looked at Nian Nian and shook his head with a smile. He realized that Nian Nian was a foodie. Now not only did she like to eat fish, but she also liked to eat tonghulu and all kinds of delicious food. Xianchu picked up the Dao scripture in front of Yi Xian and read it. After some time she looked at Yi Xian. Do you know the secret of the Dao scripture? Yi Xian felt a chill in his heart. Could it be that she knew about Dao scriptures and martial arts? At this moment Xianchu wanted to say something but hesitated. Yi Xian asked softly, what are you trying to say? Xianchu thought for a moment and said, fine, I'll take it as returning the favor. Every Dao scripture contained a Dao scripture martial art and Dao scripture mental cultivation method. These martial arts and mental cultivation methods are currently the highest level of martial arts and mental cultivation methods known to us. Mental cultivation method. Yi Xian's expression turned cold. He knew about Dao scriptures and martial arts, but he didn't know about this mental cultivation method. At this moment Yi Jiming's voice suddenly sounded. I don't know either. Yi Xian nodded and said in his heart, of course I believe you, Jiming. It seems that this Dao scripture is not as simple as we thought. Xianchu placed the Dao scripture in front of Yi Xian. I've memorized the mental cultivation method and martial arts of these Dao scriptures. Then she paused and said, 2 of the martial arts are very suitable for you. One is the Daoist fist and the Daoist body. Yi Xian was silent. Xianchu looked at Yi Xian. You're very calm. Speaking of this, she narrowed her eyes slightly. You've learned it. Yi Xian nodded. To tell you the truth, I've learned it. Xianchu was silent. Yi Xian smiled. Xianchu, you said that every Dao scripture has a mental cultivation method. I only know about Dao scriptures and martial arts, but I don't know about the mental cultivation method. Can you tell me? Xianchu was silent. Yixian was speechless. This guy, he was always silent. Xianchu suddenly said, "Sure." Then she pointed at Yixian. A ray of white light entered between Yixian's eyebrows. Soon, countless information flowed into Yixian's mind. The mental cultivation method of every Dao scripture. Gradually, Yixian's expression changed. After learning about these mental cultivation methods, Yixian realized that he was wrong. Very wrong. These Dao scriptures and martial arts were very powerful. However, without the help of mental cultivation methods, their power was only average. But with the help of mental cultivation methods, their power could truly destroy the world. Just like his Taoist fist, if it had the help of mental cultivation methods, its power could at least be several times stronger. At this moment he realized how terrifying these Dao scriptures and mental cultivation methods were. The mental cultivation method was the key. And his Taoist body also had mental cultivation methods. If it was combined with mental cultivation methods, at this moment Yixian was very excited. Xianchu suddenly said, "Are you willing to give up these 6 Dao scriptures?" Yixian smiled and said, "Why do you ask this?" Xianchu looked at Yixian and said, "If you are willing to give up these 6 Dao scriptures, I can bring you to the whirling sect. With your talent you will definitely be valued. The stage there is bigger and the cultivation resources here cannot be compared. In addition, if you are willing to join the whirling sect, you can look at the last Dao scripture." Yixian shook his head. Xianchu said, "You refuse?" Yixian nodded and said with a smile, "Miss Xianchu, I want to protect this 5th dimension." Xianchu looked at Yixian and said, "On the path of martial arts there are too many obstacles. It is not a good thing." Yixian suddenly asked, "Xianchu, do you have any friends?" Xianchu was stunned and then shook her head. "No." Yixian asked again, "What about your relatives?" Xianchu said, "Only master." Yixian smiled and said, "I feel that there are more important things in this world than the martial Dao and the sword Dao. That is friends and relatives." As he said this, he looked around and said with a smile, "This is the 5th dimension. This is my home." Xianchu looked at Yixian and said, "If you do not give up on these Dao scriptures, not only you but the entire universe will be in danger. This is because my whirling sect is not the only whirling sect in the whirling world. There are other powerful forces. If I am not wrong, these forces should already know that you have so many Dao scriptures. Before long, more and more experts from the whirling world will come to this universe. Moreover, you still have the dark world as your enemy. Your situation will become worse and worse." Yixian shook his head and smiled. "My situation has always been very bad." Xianchu was about to speak when Yixian suddenly looked at Nian Nian and said with a smile, "Are you done eating?" Nian Nian nodded and patted her stomach. She grinned and said, "I am so full." Yixian laughed and said, "Let's go, I will take you to play." As he said this, he stretched out his hand. Nian Nian quickly grabbed his hand. Yixian looked at Xianchu and said with a smile, "Miss Xianchu, let's talk another day." Xianchu nodded slightly. Yixian pulled Nian Nian away. After Yixian and Nian Nian left, an old man appeared in front of Xianchu. It was the old man from the whirling world. The old man said, "He is not willing to give up?" Xianchu nodded. The old man shook his head. "Those Dao scriptures are a disaster for him. This youth does not know how to choose." Xianchu said softly, "We have underestimated him." The old man looked at Xianchu. "What do you mean?" Xianchu looked at the old man. "Elder, why does the dark world want to ally with us?" The old man frowned. "You are saying that the dark world is afraid of Yixian." Xianchu nodded. "The dark world wants to ally with us because they want to use us." The old man said in a deep voice, "Indeed." Xianchu suddenly said, "Let's wait and see." The old man said in a deep voice, "Wait?" Xianchu nodded. "We can only wait." All he had to do was wait quietly. We do not have any deep hatred with Yixian. If we are not anxious, the other forces from the whirling world and dark world will be even more anxious. They will make the first move. The old man nodded slightly. "All right." Speaking of this, he seemed to have thought of something and said, "Girl, Yixian is a person with deep schemes. He showed you the Dao scriptures just now. That is definitely a trap. You must not have any other thoughts." Xianchu looked at the old man. "What other thoughts?" The old man smiled. "You know what I mean." Xianxia said softly, "What I see is a person who values friendship and righteousness." With that he stood up and left. In the same place the old man's expression was extremely ugly. A moment later he slammed his palm on the table. "Damn Yi Xian. Shameless." Boom. The table shattered. After returning to the sword hall, Yi Xian was about to study the Tao scripture when Venerable Mi appeared beside him. Yi Xian looked at Venerable Mi. "What's the matter?" Venerable Mi nodded. "Bai Dizzy is back." Yi Xian was struck dumb. Then he said, "You are back?" Venerable Mi nodded. "Not alone. He brought over 30 great Tao guardians. Among them there are 16 Tao defense and 14 Tao vindication. Other than that, some who left the doubting have all returned." Yi Xian said softly, "This old man is quite capable." Venerable Mi added, "He has a suggestion." Yi Xian said, "Speak." Venerable Mi said, "Bai Dizzy said that our biggest enemies now are the Dark Abyss and the Whirling World. The Dark Abyss is scarier than the Whirling World because they are united. The Whirling World is different. There are many forces there, each with their own ideas. We can form an alliance with some of the forces there. In short, we have to delay until Miss Nian Yan recovers her memory and strength." Delay. Yi Xian was silent. He really needed time now. The more time the better it was for him in the fifth dimension. Venerable Mi said, "He also said that the fifth dimension looks safe now, but it is not. Because if the Dark Abyss wants to attack, it will not give the fifth dimension any chance. For now, the doubting and the fifth dimension together might not be able to defeat the Dark Abyss." Saying this, he looked at Yi Xian. He said that although the Tao Master is strong, he is only one person. Moreover, he has not reached the Tao attainment state. Once the Dark Abyss or the Whirling World send experts above the Tao attainment state, the fifth dimension will be very passive. Therefore, we must delay until Miss Nian Yan recovers her memory and strength. Moreover, he also told you to prepare for the worst. The Dark Abyss will most likely attack soon because the Dark Abyss does not dare to let Miss Nian Yan recover her memory and strength. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian said softly, "I understand." At this time Venerable Mi said, "Also, he made a decision on his own." Yi Xian was a little puzzled. "What is it?" Venerable Mi hesitated for a moment, then said, "He has already sent people to spread the news in the fifth dimension and the myriad worlds, saying that you are the son of the ninth dimension, and that you came to the fifth dimension to gain experience." Yi Xian. Chapter 14-17. Son of the ninth dimension. Yi Xian was speechless. What was this old man Bai Dizzy trying to do? Venerable Mi said, "He's probably doing this to confuse our opponents." Yi Xian smiled, "Let him be." He looked at Venerable Mi. The fifth dimension might not be peaceful during this period of time. You have to keep an eye on it. Venerable Mi nodded. "Understood." With that he quietly retreated. Within the room, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground and started to study the Tao scripture. With this Tao scripture, his Tao sword and Tao body would have a qualitative breakthrough. Power. Without power, everything was nonsense. In the fifth dimension, Lian Zun looked down. Beside him was the ancestor. After a while, Lian Zun suddenly smiled. "If we make a move now, what are our chances of winning?" The ancestor shook his head. "Unknown." Lian Zun frowned. "Unknown?" The ancestor nodded. "I've calculated it, but the heavenly secrets here are illusory, especially that Yi Xian. His fate cannot be determined." Lian Zun said softly, "So mysterious?" The ancestor nodded. "However, I suggest that we make a move as soon as possible. Because this person is too monstrous, the longer we delay, the greater the price we will have to pay." Lian Zun was silent. The ancestor asked, "Are you worried about that plain-dressed girl?" Lian Zun looked up into the depths of the starry sky. "I wonder about that plain-dressed girl. That person's bloodline is not simple either. I've never seen such a strange bloodline. Other than that, don't forget that woman from the sword sect." Hearing this, the ancestor's expression became solemn. "Yin. It was this woman that caused An Yuan to suffer heavy losses." Lian Zun said, "I've already investigated. The sword sect below and Situ Tingyun's sword sect are in the meridian opening realm. In other words, when we make a move, Situ Tingyun might also make a move." The ancestor said solemnly, "But if we don't make a move now, once Moon Yen Yen recovers his memories and strength, then..." Moon Yen Yen. Hearing this, Lian Zun's expression turned solemn. This woman had almost killed a Dao ancestor with less than 30% of her strength. Most importantly, she had suppressed the entire fifth dimension by herself. Conservatively speaking, this woman's strength was at least above the Dao realm. The previous master said solemnly, "No matter what, the longer we drag it out, the more disadvantageous it will be for us." Lian Xun looked up towards the depths of the starry sky. That Dao father should be finding that woman soon. The previous teacher asked, "What if that woman's strength exceeds our expectations?" Lian Xun asked, "Is our dark abyss very weak?" The previous teacher was silent. Lian Xun said with a smile, "Whether it's Tingyun Moon Yen or that woman in a plain dress, I only don't look down on them. I'm not afraid of them. If it wasn't for the ancient god abyss, we would have destroyed them as well." The previous teacher hesitated for a moment before saying, "We still can't underestimate the enemy." Lian Xun slowly closed his eyes. "I won't underestimate the enemy, but I, the Dark Abyss, have never been afraid of anyone." Arrogant, though he was confident. And Yuan had the capital to do so. At this moment, Lian Xun suddenly asked, "Is there any movement from the ancient god Abyss?" The first teacher shook his head. "There's no movement." Lian Xun frowned. Could it be that they aren't tempted by the Dao scriptures? The previous master said solemnly, "It shouldn't be that he isn't tempted. He is probably observing in the dark and waiting for an opportunity." After a moment of silence, Lian Xun said, "No matter what, let us know. Keep an eye on them." The first master nodded. "Understood." Lian Xun looked down and chuckled. "Wait for the Dao ancestors' news, then we will make our move." The previous teacher quietly retreated. Lian Xun slowly closed his eyes and said softly, "Dao ancestor should have found that woman by now." In the five-dimensional universe. 10 days later. Xian walked out of the room and slowly closed his eyes. He operated the Dao body cultivation method, and gradually, a mysterious aura appeared around his body. Daoist body supreme energy. Xian glanced at the layer of stellar energy on his body. This layer of stellar energy was equivalent to a shield. If one wanted to hurt his body, they had to break through this layer of stellar energy first. And the strength of this layer of stellar energy was dependent on his Dao body. In other words, the stronger his Dao body was, the stronger this layer of stellar energy was. Most importantly, as long as his body was not broken, he could continue to use this stellar energy. Simply put, unless the opponent broke his stellar energy and body in an instant, he would be able to continuously use this Dao body supreme energy. As long as his stellar energy and body could not be broken in an instant, he was invincible. It had to be said that even Xian felt that this Dao scripture martial art and mental cultivation method was too abnormal. Other than this Dao body, the power of his Dao sword had also been greatly enhanced at least 5 times. It could be said that the difference between this Dao scripture martial art and the mental cultivation method was like heaven and earth. Only with the assistance of the Dao scripture martial art could it be considered a true Dao scripture martial art. At this moment, a woman suddenly appeared in front of Xian. The person who came was an old acquaintance of his. "Ying Yao Yao." Xian smiled. "Heavenly King, how have you been?" Ying Yao Yao sized up Xian. "Your strength has increased again?" Xian smiled. "You can say so." Ying Yao Yao glanced at Xian. "You are getting stronger by the day." Xian laughed. "Heavenly King, there must be something you need from me, right?" Ying Yao Yao looked at Xian. "From what we know, the Dark Abyss might be making a move." "The Dark Abyss?" Xian's smile gradually disappeared. "Do you know how many people they have?" Ying Yao Yao shook her head. "Nothing." Xian was silent. Qi Yao Yao continued. "In any case, you have to be careful. The Dark Abyss is not like doubting. If they want to make a move, they will definitely be prepared for everything. In other words, once they make a move, they might not give you any chance." Xian nodded. "Thank you for the reminder." Ying Yao Yao asked, "Have you come into contact with the whirling world?" Xian nodded. "Yes, I have." Qi Yao Yao said, "But you still have to be careful of them. They haven't made a move yet, probably waiting for the Dark Abyss to make a move." Xian nodded. "I know." Ying Yao Yao hesitated, then asked, "When will Miss Nian Nian regain her memory?" Xian smiled bitterly. "I don't know." Ying Yao Yao looked at Xian, not saying anything. Xian said again, "I really don't know." Nian Nian showed no signs of regaining her memory. Ying Yao Yao sighed softly. "I thought things would come to an end after the doubting incident, But now the whirling sect and the dark abyss have appeared. With that she glanced at Xian. Take care. With that she turned and left. Xian was silent where he was. At this moment, Nian appeared beside Xian. She gently held Xian's hand. Is it because of me? Xian shook his head. It's not because of you, it's because of me. Nian tilted her head and looked at Xian. Why? Why? Xian said with a smile. Because I have some good stuff that they all want. Nian frowned slightly. Why? Xian thought for a moment then said, maybe I look easy to bully. Nian blurted out, I'll protect you. With that she was stunned. Xian was also stunned. She looked at Nian. Nian. You? Nian was a little confused. Xian hurriedly said, did you remember something? Nian shook her head. No. I don't know what happened to me just now. Xian gently rubbed Nian's little head, smiled. It's fine, it's fine. Let's go, I'll take you to roast fish. Hearing this, Nian's eyes lit up. Okay. Xian laughed. He took Nian's hand and walked into the distance. Behind the two of them was Venerated Me. At this moment an old man appeared beside Venerated Me. It was Bai Dizzy. Bai Dizzy said softly, Are you worried? Venerated Me nodded. But I don't think Dao Master is worried at all. Bai Dizzy said, He's not worried, he should have a plan to deal with it. Venerated Me shook his head. Recently there have been some mysterious auras appearing in the fifth dimension. Some of them are so powerful. I'm afraid they've already surpassed Dao attainment. Bai Dizzy was silent. Venerated Me sighed. Those 6 scrolls of Dao scriptures are really a disaster. Bai Dizzy glanced at Venerated Me. Do you think if we hand them over and Yuan will let him and the fifth dimension go? Venerated Me frowned. Why not? Isn't their goal the 6 scrolls of Dao scriptures? Bai Dizzy looked at Venerated Me. If you were in Yuan after snatching Xian's 6 scrolls of Dao scriptures, would you still let him and Mu Nian live? Venerated Me was silent. Definitely not. Because if these two were alive they would pose too great of a threat. Thinking of this, Venerated Me sighed. Bai Dizzy continued, whether it's in Yuan or Whirling Sect, they won't let Xian and Mu Nian live just like us. If we don't kill Xian and Mu Nian once Xian grows up, or Mu Nian recovers his memory and strength, at that time who can withstand their revenge? Saying this he looked at Xian and Nian in the distance, whispering, I've dealt with him so many times. This guy is very sinister, let's wait and see. Venerated Me nodded. That's the only way. Bai Dizzy said, I'm going to find Zhen Wu. Venerated Me frowned. Will he come back? Bai Dizzy whispered, I'll try my best to persuade him to come back. Saying this he turned and disappeared into the horizon. Somewhere in the starry sky, Dao Ancestor flew through the sky, his speed reaching the extreme. Wherever he passed the starry sky trembled. Looking for the plain-dressed woman. In fact he had long wanted to see who this woman was. Because this woman was too mysterious. She only needed one sword to kill. This was the result of their investigation. Other than this there was no other information. How strong was she? No one knew. But Dao Ancestor knew he would know soon. At this moment, Dao Ancestor suddenly looked into the distance, his eyes narrowed. I finally found you. Let me see if you can kill me with one sword. Saying this his speed suddenly increased. Peace, vote? Chapter 14:18. In the endless starry sky, the stars shone brightly, mysterious and tranquil. How big was the universe? No one knew. Even the plain-dressed woman did not know. She walked from the 3rd dimension to the 5th dimension, but there was still no end to the starry sky. The starry sky was the same as the path of martial arts. There was no end and no one knew where it ended. The vast universe was endless. The plain-dressed woman walked slowly. She walked very slowly because she could not completely sense that person. To be precise, it was the source of the calamity. Fate. Everyone in the world was studying fate, including the owner of the Dao scripture, but had fate really been studied? Man conquers nature? Many people were strong enough to change their fate, but who could be sure that the fate you changed was not your true fate? In fact, she had tried to forcefully cut off the cause of the calamity on Yi Xian's body. With her strength, it was not difficult at all to cut off the cause of the calamity. Just one sword was enough. But she gave up in the end. Because she realized that if she cut off the cause of the calamity, Yi Xian would die. There was only one explanation. This cause of the calamity had a lot to do with Zhou Xian himself. Fate was like an invisible hand that controlled everything in the dark. Her goal was to find out who this giant hand belonged to, find it and then kill it. At this moment, a voice came from behind the plain-dressed woman. "I finally found you." The plain-dressed woman stopped in her tracks. A man suddenly appeared 100 feet in front of her. Dao Ancestor. The Dao Ancestor looked at the plain-dressed woman and smiled. "It was not easy to find you." The plain-dressed woman looked at the Dao Ancestor and did not speak. The Dao Ancestor chuckled. "I only came this time for one purpose, and that is to see how strong you are." "How strong?" The plain-dressed woman said softly. "You want to know how strong I am?" The Dao Ancestor looked at the plain-dressed woman. "Yes." The plain-dressed woman shook her head. "You will be disappointed." The Dao Ancestor frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" The plain-dressed woman walked towards the Dao Ancestor. "I don't know myself, so how would you know?" As the voice fell, the plain-dressed woman had already appeared tens of thousands of feet behind the Dao Ancestor. In the same place, the Dao Ancestor looked into the distance, his eyes empty. In between his eyebrows there was a small sword hole. The plain-dressed woman drew her sword. She drew her sword. However, he did not know when she had struck. When did she do it? Of course, this was not the main point. Most importantly, his Dao father was dead. Moreover, the woman in the plain dress had only used one sword strike. Even at that moment, the Dao Ancestor still did not know how strong the woman in the plain dress was. Because she only used one sword. In the starry sky, the body of the Dao Ancestor became more and more illusory. He knew that he was going to disappear completely. At that moment, the Dao Ancestor suddenly smiled. "What are you laughing at?" He laughed at himself for being a frog in a well. Before coming here, he felt that even if he wasn't a match for the woman in a plain dress, it wouldn't be a problem for him to escape unscathed. However, only now did he realize how childish his thoughts were. All this while, whether it was doubting or in Yuan, they had both placed great importance on the plain-dressed lady. However, at this moment he realized that they had underestimated her. Great contempt. When they faced the plain-dressed lady, they thought that she was at most at the attainment of Dao. That was because the attainment of Dao was already the highest realm they could come into contact with. However, at that moment he suddenly understood that the woman in the plain dress might be so strong that it was beyond their understanding. It was very stupid to use their eyes and knowledge to measure the woman in the plain dress. Because no matter how much they valued her, they were actually underestimating her. She was already so strong that it was beyond their understanding. He only understood this at the moment of his death. Apart from that, he also understood why no one knew how terrifying the woman in the plain dress was. It was because those who had seen her might have already died. As if he thought of something, he said softly, "Zhou Xian, you have such a strong backing, why don't you say it? Isn't this harming others?" As he said that, he opened his palm and a copper coin slowly floated up. Soon a voice rang out in the starry sky. "The woman in the plain dress, isn't that strong?" This sentence disappeared in the starry sky along with the copper coin. The Dao Ancestor also disappeared along with it. If he couldn't take revenge, then he would drag a few more people to be buried with him. He also wanted to drag Zhou Xian to be buried with him, but his strength didn't allow him to. Since he couldn't drag Zhou Xian to be buried with him, then he could drag others. In the distance, the woman in the plain dress continued to move forward. To her, what happened just now was just a small interlude. She didn't take it to heart at all. After an unknown amount of time, the woman in the plain dress suddenly stopped. Not far in front of her there was a huge city wall. This city wall spanned tens of thousands of miles across the starry sky, almost separating the entire starry sky. On these city walls there were statues holding long spears. Behind the city wall, it was hazy and nothing could be seen. The woman in the plain dress did not stop and continued to move forward. Soon the woman in the plain dress arrived at the city gate. The city gate was open and there was no one guarding it. The woman in the plain dress continued to move forward. At this moment, a voice floated out from the city gate. "One more step and you will die." The woman in the plain dress glanced at the city gate. "You're begging for death." After saying that, she had already entered the city gate. A moment later, a bloody head rolled out of the city gate. Inside the city gate, an angry shout suddenly rang out. "Who are you?" There was no response, but another head rolled out of the city gate. Soon a powerful aura suddenly shot into the sky from within the city gate. Following that, an ancient voice came from within the city gate. Who are you? How dare you invade my Xian city? Before the voice faded, another head rolled out from within the city gate. At this moment, a voice rang out from within the city gate. Senior, my Xian city's words just now have offended you. Please forgive me. This time, no head rolled out from within the city gate. A moment later, an incomparably respectful voice rang out from within the city gate. We respectfully send off Senior. Senior, take care. In the five-dimensional universe. In the starry sky, the previous master beside Lian Zun suddenly opened his eyes. In the next moment, a copper coin appeared in front of him. Lian Zun looked at the previous master. There's news? The previous master said softly, the Dao ancestor is dead. Dead? Lian Zun frowned slightly. Did he say anything? The previous master said solemnly. He said that the woman in the plain dress is not that strong. Not that strong. Lian Zun said softly. Looks like he fought with the woman in the plain dress. The previous master was silent. Lian Zun continued. Looks like this woman in the plain dress will at most achieve the Dao. If that's the case, then there's nothing to be afraid of. The previous master shook his head. I still feel that this matter is not simple. Lian Zun looked at the previous master. What do you mean? The previous master said solemnly. I can't say for sure, but I have a bad feeling. After a moment of silence, Lian Zun shook his head. No matter what, it's time to make a move. As he said that, he looked down at the five-dimensional universe. If we continue to wait once that Moon Yen recovers his memories and strength, it will be troublesome. The previous master did not say anything. He raised his head and looked into the depths of the starry sky. He wanted to sense the woman in the plain dress, but he could not sense her at all. As if he had thought of something, he took out the tortoise shell to make a divination. However, he could not calculate anything. Lian Zun laughed. Don't think too much. As long as she doesn't surpass that level, we can deal with her. As he said that, he turned around and opened his palm. A black seal suddenly flew out. In the next moment, the seal directly turned into a pitch-black door. The door stood in the starry sky, and inside the door was a black whirlpool. A moment later, the space inside the door suddenly trembled. Not long later, 1,000 experts with spears and black shields walked out. Underworld army. Among these 1,000 people, the lowest was at the Dao validation realm, and the equipment they were wearing were all top-notch equipment. Other than these 1,000 people, there were 6 black-robed elders beside Lian Zun. 6 Dao attainment realm experts. Including Lian Zun and the previous master, there were a total of 8 Dao attainment realm experts. Lian Zun suddenly laughed. Let's go meet this young Master Yi. After saying that, he disappeared. Below, in the five-dimensional universe, Yi Xian, who was playing with Nian Nian, suddenly raised his head. After a moment of silence, he looked down at Nian Nian and said with a smile, You play by yourself, I have something to do. Nian Nian gazed at Yi Xian. All right. Yi Xian grinned and was about to leave when Nian Nian suddenly grabbed his hand. Yi Xian looked at Nian Nian and smiled. What's wrong? Nian Nian hesitated for a moment and said, I'll wait for you. Yi Xian smiled. All right. Nian Nian gazed at Yi Xian. Don't lie to me. Yi Xian roared with laughter. I definitely won't lie to you. As he spoke, he rubbed Nian Nian's little head lightly, and then he transformed into a ray of light that shot into the sky. In the sky above Dao City, a ray of light descended in front of Lian Zun, and then it dispersed to reveal Yi Xian's figure. Lian Zun smiled. Yi Xian, we meet again. Yi Xian grinned. What's your name? Lian Zun smiled. You can call me Lian Zun. Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, There doesn't seem to be any deep enmity between me and an Yuan. Lian Zun nodded. Indeed. However, we've taken a liking to the Daoist scriptures in your possession. So, can you give us those scrolls of Dao scriptures? Yi Xian smiled. I, Yi Xian, have always been very generous to my loved ones. Why don't you become one of my loved ones? In that case, I'll give the Daoist scriptures to you. Lian Zun frowned slightly. Become one of your loved ones? Yi Xian nodded. Yes. I'll take you as my son. In that way, aren't we family? Since we're family, then what harm is there in giving them to you? Lian Zun's expression instantly turned cold. Yi Xian, do you only know how to use words? Yi Xian chuckled. You want the Daoist scriptures yet aren't willing to be my son. Since you're not my son, then why should I give them to you? Lian Zun gazed at Yi Xian. Kill. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly opened his palm and a sword appeared there. He roared with laughter. Lian Zun, why don't we have a fight first? Lian Zun chuckled. I have the advantage in numbers. Why should I fight you in a one-on-one battle? As he spoke, he looked down and his gaze fell on Yan Yan, who was on the street below. Kill her. The true source of his fear was Moon Yan Yan. When he heard Lian Zun, an old man at the Dao Attainment Realm charged towards Moon Yan Yan. Suddenly, a ray of light appeared in front of the old man. The old man frowned slightly and then he raised his fist and swung it. Bang! The ray of light didn't shatter, but the old man was pushed over 30 m back. Lian Zun frowned when he witnessed this scene. Yi Xian's strength had exceeded his expectations. Suddenly Yi Xian appeared in front of Lian Zun, and then he swung his sword. Lian Zun's eyes narrowed slightly. Yi Xian intends to kill me first. But is that even possible? Suddenly, Lian Zun's expression changed drastically. Because an enormous Tai Chi diagram had suddenly appeared beneath Yi Xian's feet. Along with the appearance of the Tai Chi diagram, his cultivation had been forcefully suppressed from the peak of the Dao Attainment Realm to the Dao Control Realm. He'd been directly suppressed by an entire realm. Moreover, Lian Zun possessed 4 domains. 4 domains. Moreover, Yi Xian's attack was a Dao sword, a strengthened version of the Dao sword. In an instant, Yi Xian had practically utilized all his trump cards. At this moment, terror appeared in Lian Zun's eyes. He hadn't expected that Yi Xian would become so terrifying in an instant. He didn't give it any further thought. He'd lost the initiative, so he didn't even have a chance to dodge. He could only defend passively. Lian Zun suddenly raised his arms, and a powerful force swept out from within him. Bang! Everyone watched as Yi Xian's sword descended. Bang! Lian Zun's body was blasted into pieces. Lian Zun's soul was about to flee. Meanwhile, Yi Xian swung his sword with his left hand and it struck Lian Zun's head. In an instant, Lian Zun's soul was absorbed. It was an instant kill. Yi Xian sheathed his sword and then he glanced at the dumbstruck crowd. That's it? I didn't even get to attack and he fell. Everyone was speechless. Chapter 14:19. Silence. Deathly silence. No one expected Yi Xian to kill Lian Zun in seconds. Lian Zun was at the peak of the Dao Attainment Realm. Let alone the Dark Abyss experts, even Venerable Me and the rest on Yi Xian's side were shocked. Yi Xian killed a Dao Attainment Realm expert in seconds. This was too exaggerated. In fact, even Yi Xian himself was shocked. His goal just now was to heavily injure Lian Zun, but he didn't expect to kill him instead. Only now did he realize that he had underestimated his own strength all along. It should be said that he underestimated the power of the Dao Seal and Dao Scripture. The main reason he could kill Lian Zun in seconds was because of the Dao Seal and Dao Scripture. One must know that the Dao Seal not only brought him infinitely close to the Dao Attainment Realm, it also suppressed Lian Zun to the Dao Controlling Realm. Lian Zun no longer had an advantage in terms of cultivation realm. Coupled with the suppression of his 4 domains and the element of surprise, Lian Zun was killed. Yi Xian collected his thoughts and looked at the Dark Abyss experts. You guys don't really think I'm weak, do you? The ancestor stared at Yi Xian. Retreat. Retreat. He now understood that the Dark Abyss had severely underestimated Yi Xian's strength. Yi Xian's cultivation realm did not match his battle power. Retreat. Yi Xian's lips curled up. Do you think this is your home? You can come and go as you please. With that, he drew his sword and charged out. Venerable Me and the rest also made their move. Although the 5th dimension had fewer Dao Attainment Realm experts than the Dark Abyss, at this moment, the 5th dimension's momentum was like a rainbow. In terms of momentum, the 5th dimension had crushed the Dark Abyss. Yi Xian had killed Lian Zun in seconds. Not to mention the others, even Venerable Me's confidence soared. The ancestor did not choose to continue fighting, but retreated to the black door behind him. Just as the ancestor and the rest were about to retreat, 10 powerful auras suddenly appeared in front of the black door. The one leading them was Su Ku. In fact, when the Dark World came to the 5th dimension, he had been secretly preparing to act at any time. Suja had given a strict order to not let anything happen to Yi Xian. However, he had not expected Yi Xian to kill Lian Zun in a second. In fact, at that moment even he himself was stunned. Did this young master Yi take medicine? He actually became so ferocious. Amidst his shock, he saw that his teacher and the others were about to retreat. At this time he no longer remained silent and decisively chose to attack. If the ancestor and the others could die here, it would be a great thing for the ancient god Abyss. Seeing Su Ku and the others appear, the ancestor's face changed. Ancient god Abyss, he did not expect the ancient god Abyss to hit him when he was down. Su Ku did not care about the previous teacher, and directly brought the 9 people behind him and rushed forward. Seeing the appearance of Su Ku and the others, Zhou Xian was stunned. He knew Su Ku, but he didn't know the people behind him. This wasn't the main point. The main point was, why would these people come to help him? Could it be that her charm was too great? On the other side, Xian Chu and the old man beside her quietly watched as Zhou Xian and the others surrounded and killed the experts from the Dark Abyss. Actually, both of them were extremely shocked at this moment. Zhou Xian had just killed a Dao Attainment Realm expert in a second. It was an instant kill. Although he had used external items, it was still too terrifying. Xian Chu said softly, "We underestimated him." The old man was silent. This was a serious underestimation. Xian Chu looked at Su Ku and the others. These people should be from the ancient god Abyss. It seems that the ancient god Abyss has chosen to stand on Zhou Xian's side. The old man said, "The ancient god Abyss and the dark Abyss are mortal enemies. It is not surprising that they would help Zhou Xian." Xian Chu looked into the distance and did not speak. The old man sighed softly. This Zhou Xian was too good at pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger. When the two of them went to see Zhou Xian, this guy kept showing weakness. Too cunning. On the other side, the Lord and the others were also there. At this moment, the Lord and the others had extremely solemn expressions. They had to admit that Zhou Xian's instant kill of a Dao Attainment Realm expert had shocked them. That was the peak of the Dao Attainment Realm. He had been instantly killed. At this moment, the Lord suddenly said, "That is the Dao Seal, a treasure of the doubting realm. It used to doubting our ancestors. Not only can it increase the owner's strength, but it can also suppress the opponent's realm." When he spoke up to here, he paused for a moment and said, "But even then it's still a bit too exaggerated." Yan Yaoyao looked at Zhou Xian in the distance. "It seems that we have not truly understood him." The Lord smiled and said, "He has indeed been giving us surprises." Luo Ho suddenly said, "Should we help him now?" The Lord shook his head. "There is no point in helping him now." Luo Ho was silent. He naturally understood what the Lord meant. If they wanted to help, they should help first. If they helped now, they would not be sincere. The Lord looked at Zhou Xian in the distance and smiled. "He does not need our help." As he said this, he seemed to have noticed something and frowned. His sword. Everyone looked at Zhou Xian in the distance. At this moment, the sword in Zhou Xian's hand was constantly devouring the souls of the Dark Abyss experts. At this moment, including the previous Lian Zun, the soul-suppressing sword had already absorbed the souls of 4 Dao Attainment Realm experts. The rest of the Dao Attainment Realm experts were countless. The Lord's expression was a little solemn. This sword has probably broken through again. About an hour later, the battle ended. The late master brought a few Dao Attainment experts and escaped, but the rest were all killed. One should know that the ancient god Abyss, including the doubting, had a total of 13 Dao Attainment Realm experts. Not far away, Zhou Xian put away his sword and walked in front of Su Ku. He smiled. "Senior, we meet again." Su Ku smiled. "A scholar has been separated for 3 days. My young friend is no longer the young friend from before." In fact, his heart was rather complicated. When he first met Zhou Xian, he still had the ability to kill Zhou Xian. But now Zhou Xian already had the ability to kill him. This speed of improvement was simply unimaginable. Zhou Xian glanced at the people behind Su Ku and said, "Senior, you are from the ancient god Abyss?" Su Ku nodded. "Yes." Zhou Xian looked at Su Ku. "Senior, why did you help me?" Su Ku hesitated and said, "We are mortal enemies with the Dark Abyss. The enemies of the Dark Abyss are the friends of the ancient god Abyss." Zhou Xian said, "Is that all?" Su Ku smiled. "My young friend, don't worry. The ancient god Abyss has no ill intentions towards you." Zhou Xian smiled. "Senior, you must be joking. No matter what, thank you for your help just now. I, Zhou Xian, am eternally grateful." Su Ku said in a low voice, "My young friend, the Dark Abyss has failed this time. They will definitely not give up. And this force is extremely powerful. You must be careful. He paused and said, during this period of time, the 10 of us will stay in the 5th dimension to prevent the Dark Abyss from launching a sneak attack. Xian hesitated for a moment and said, you will stay in the 5th dimension to protect me? Suku asked, is there a problem? Xian looked at Suku. Why? Suku thought for a moment and said, we want to be friends with you. Xian's expression was slightly strange. Is my charm really that great? At this time Suku suddenly smiled bitterly. My young friend, to tell you the truth, the reason we came to the 5th dimension is related to the senior behind you. The senior behind me? Xian was struck dumb. Then he said, Senior? Suku was surprised. The senior in the plain dress? Xian nodded. Yes. Suku looked at Xian. I wonder what is the relationship between you two? Xian said, I am her brother. Suku's expression was a bit strange. This younger sister is much stronger than her brother. Although Xian is also strong, he is still not strong enough compared to the plain-dressed girl. Xian sighed with emotion. Ting-er. In fact, he really wanted to see Qing-er, but he didn't know where she was now. At this time, a sword cry suddenly came from the side. Xian turned his head and saw that the sword cry was from the soul-suppressing sword. After absorbing so many souls, the soul-suppressing sword's aura was crazily rising. Seeing this scene, Xian was happy. The soul-suppressing sword is about to break through. As if thinking of something, Xian directly stored the soul-suppressing sword into the prison pagoda. It's better to break through in the pagoda. After that, Xian put away the equipment of the experts from the Dark Abyss. All of them were the best of the best. Even though they couldn't compare to the treasures of the Jialong clan, they were still top grade. At this time Suku suddenly said, Little friend, I will leave first. You must be careful during this period of time. That Dark Abyss is not a good person. You must not underestimate it. Xian nodded. Understood. Thank you for your help, senior. Suku smiled. You are too polite. From today onwards, my ancient god Abyss and the 5th dimension are allies. As he said that, he specially looked at Xianchu and Suku. Xian felt a little emotional. He naturally knew that the reason why the ancient god Abyss was so friendly to him was because of Qing. Needless to say, Qing must have been to the ancient god Abyss. He just didn't know if the ancient god Abyss was beaten. He knew that Qing's temper was not very good. Suku didn't say anything else. He turned around and left. As for the 10 Dao realm experts he brought with him, they stayed in the 5th dimension. Xian looked at Venerable Me. Senior Me, clean up the battlefield. Venerable Me nodded. All right. Xian turned around and left. Everyone looked at each other. They hadn't expected the matter to end just like that. On the other side, Xianchu said softly, Looks like the ancient god Abyss didn't become friends with Xian because they are mortal enemies with the Dark Abyss. The old man fell silent. At this moment, he realized that the matter was getting more and more troublesome. Xianchu suddenly looked down. The Dark Abyss will definitely not give up. Let us wait and see. As she spoke, she paused for a moment and said, Elder, send an order to my master. Ask her to come here. The old man was stunned and then he said, This? Why? Xianchu looked at the old man. The two of yous can't hold this place down. The old man. Below, Xian arrived on the street. As soon as he landed, Nian Nian threw herself into his arms. She hugged Xian tightly as if she was afraid that Xian would lose her. Xian was about to speak when Nian Nian suddenly looked up at Xian. At some point her face was covered in tears. Xian felt an indescribable pain in his heart. He hurriedly said, Don't cry. Who bullied you? Nian Nian looked at Xian as her tears flowed uncontrollably. Am I very useless? I can't help you at all. Xian was about to speak when the space beside him suddenly split open. A moment later a figure floated out. Xian's expression changed drastically when he saw this. He suddenly drew his sword and slashed. The sword slashed down. The sword slashed through the air. Xian was alarmed. He activated his Dao seal and was about to attack again when the figure had already retreated 100 feet away. At the same time, Nian Nian was beside him. Above the Dao attainment realm, Xian's expression instantly turned ferocious. The figure suddenly grabbed Nian Nian's shoulder with his right hand. If you want to save her, bring the 6 Dao scriptures to the mortal world. Come alone. If you don't come within 2 hours, her soul will be destroyed. With that, he and Mu Niannian disappeared. At this moment, Nian Nian's weak voice came from afar. Don't come. In the same place, Yi Xian held the sword in his right hand tightly. His entire body emitted an extremely terrifying killing intent and hostility. P.S. Now that Qing Yuan is in my hands, if you want to save her, give me the ticket. If not, I'll kill her. Do as you see fit. Chapter 1420. Venerated Me and the others appeared the moment the figure and Nian Nian vanished. Venerated Me and the others' expressions darkened when they saw Nian Nian being taken away. They hadn't expected An Yuan to send an expert above the Dao realm. Meanwhile, Suku suddenly appeared with an old man by his side. It was Suja. Suja looked at Yi Xian and hesitated for a moment before he said, "My friend, I'm sorry. The old man is late." Actually, Suku had gone back to invite Suja over. He knew that An Yuan would never let the matter rest, and if An Yuan wanted to make a move, he would definitely send an expert above the Dao realm. Because an expert at the Dao realm was no longer a threat to Yi Xian. Therefore he had decided to invite Suja over. However, he hadn't expected An Yuan to act so quickly. Yi Xian took a deep breath and looked at Suja. "Senior, where is the Milky Way?" Suja hesitated for a moment before he said, "It's a very dangerous place. It's a forbidden place because anyone who steps into the mortal world will have their cultivation sealed and become immortal." Yi Xian looked at Suja. "How do I get there?" Suja said solemnly, "My friend, you'd better not go. Because your cultivation will be sealed and you will become immortal. However, An Yuan won't do that. Because the mortal world was created by the owner of the Dark Scripture. Anyone who cultivates the Dark Scripture will not be suppressed by the Dark Dao laws there. The reason he wants you to go there is because he knows that he can't kill you in the outside world. However, if you go there, Yi Xian closed his eyes slowly. "Senior, just tell me how to get there." Suja wanted to persuade him, but Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes. His eyes were bloodshot. The power of his bloodline was surging. Suja was shocked. Yi Xian's bloodline was actually so powerful. After a while, Suku sighed softly and pointed with his finger. A ray of white light entered between Yi Xian's brows. Just as Yi Xian was about to disappear, a voice came from the side. "Remember to come back." The one who spoke was Zhang Wenxiu. Yi Xian disappeared into the horizon. Zhang Wenxiu looked at the sword ray in the horizon and a voice floated over. "I'll try my best. Try my best." Zhang Wenxiu was stunned. Suku looked at Suja. Suja shook his head. "There's no other way." Suja said, "There's no other way." It was not because he, the Dark Scripture Master, was because he was the disciple of the Dao Scripture's disciple. One had to know that the owner of the Dark Scripture was the disciple of the Dao Scripture's owner. He created the Dark Scripture based on the Dao Scripture. How terrifying was his strength. The Wan had the Yen had always had the Abai. The Yen had always, but they always had the dragon. Zhang had always. The Gu Ancient had the Wan. The ancient God Abyss would enter the mortal world as soon as the Dark Abyss was in danger. At that time, the ancient God Abyss would not be able to do anything. The ancient God Abyss wanted Yi Xian to go to the mortal world for a simple reason. It was to deal with the ancient God Abyss and the people behind Yi Xian. As long as Yi Xian entered the mortal world, the ancient God Abyss would not dare to make a move. As for the people behind Yi Xian, no matter how strong they were, would they dare to go to the mortal world? It was fair to say that for Yi Xian this was a deadly trap. At this moment an old man suddenly appeared in front of them. It was the master who had escaped earlier. It was not his real body but a shadow. The master looked at Suja. "Suja, the honored one said that he did not expect you to protect Yi Xian personally." Suja was expressionless. "I did not expect the honored one of the 3 masters of the Dark Abyss to come personally." The master who had kidnapped Mu Niannian was the honored one of the 3 masters of the Dark Abyss. The master laughed. We have won this battle." Suja smiled. "Is that so?" The master smiled. "We welcome the people behind Yi Xian to the mortal world. They must come, otherwise we will be disappointed." After saying that, he disappeared. Suja was silent for a moment, then he asked softly, "Will she go?" The she he was referring to was the woman in the plain dress. At this moment a voice suddenly rang out, "Where is he?" Suja turned his head. There was a woman standing in front of him. Suja looked at the woman in front of him, his eyes full of wariness. He did not know when this person had appeared in front of him. Who was this? Zhou Xian asked in a low voice. Your Excellency, you are? The woman looked at Zhou Xian. Where is he? Zhou Xian hesitated. My friend Yi Xian? The woman nodded. Zhou Xian said in a low voice. The people from the dark abyss sent him to the mortal world. The woman looked into the depths of the starry sky. How? Zhou Xian hesitated for a moment, then said, Senior, the mortal world was created by the owner of the dark scripture. It has the law of darkness. It can suppress one's cultivation. The woman suddenly asked, How do we get there? Zhou Xian looked at the woman. She blinked. Don't I look like an expert? Zhou Xian was speechless. The woman said again, Show me the way. Zhou Xian hesitated for a moment, then bent his finger and a ray of white light entered the woman's forehead. After a while the woman was about to leave, but at this moment, Zhang Wenxiu suddenly asked, You are? The woman looked at Zhang Wenxiu and asked, You are? Zhang Wenxiu looked at the woman. I am his woman. Woman. The woman blinked. His woman. Zhang Wenxiu looked straight at the woman. Yes. The woman looked at Zhang Wenxiu and smiled. I like your character. As she said that, she opened her palm. Let's go, I'll bring you to see your man. Zhang Wenxiu hesitated for a moment, then walked over to the woman and held her hand. The woman was about to leave with Zhang Wenxiu when she seemed to have noticed something. She suddenly turned her head and looked at Xiaoqi. When she saw Xiaoqi, the woman was slightly stunned, then she nodded slightly as a greeting. Xiaoqi looked at the woman, not saying a word. At this moment, Zhang Wenxiu suddenly asked, Senior, you are? The woman smiled. According to seniority, he should call me Aunt. As she said that, she looked into the distance. Let's not waste any more time. This clone has gone through too many galaxies and wasted too much energy. It can't stay for too long, let's go. As soon as she finished speaking, she vanished on the spot with Zhang Wenxiu. In the field, Su Zhou and the others felt like they had been struck by lightning. Clone. It was just a clone. Su Zhou felt his head spinning. At that moment he had felt an incomparable sense of danger, but he had never thought that this woman was just a clone. Just a clone was enough to make him feel an incomparable sense of danger. What did this mean? If the real body was here, how terrifying would it be? Thinking of this, Su Zhou could not help but break out in cold sweat. At this moment Suku suddenly said softly, His father, his brother, his sister, his senior sister, his aunt. This is too much. Su Zhou was speechless. Somewhere in the galaxy, the woman was holding Zhang Wenxiu's hand as they flew through the air. Zhang Wenxiu looked at the woman. Senior. The woman smiled. Call me Aunt. Zhang Wenxiu hesitated, then said, Aunt. He's not an ordinary person, right? The woman nodded. He's not an ordinary person. Zhang Wenxiu was silent. The woman said softly, His background is very complicated, I can't explain it clearly. Zhang Wenxiu was silent for a moment, then said, Are you guys very far away? The woman nodded. Very far away. It's not easy to come here. Zhang Wenxiu was silent. The woman glanced at Zhang Wenxiu, smiled. I should bring you to see someone. Zhang Wenxiu looked at the woman. Who? The woman smiled. His mother. Zhang Wenxiu said in a low voice. Zhou Xian? The woman shook her head. His real mother. Zhang Wenxiu frowned. Zhou Xian is not his real mother? The woman hesitated, then said, You can say that. But, Sai, this matter is very complicated. It's all because of the disaster cause, I can't explain it clearly to you. Zhang Wenxiu suddenly asked, How strong is the woman in the plain dress? She had always been curious about the woman in the plain dress. The woman was silent. Zhang Wenxiu looked at the woman, then asked, Aunt, can you beat her? The woman blinked. Can I not answer this question? Zhang Wenxiu was speechless. Somewhere in the starry sky, Yi Xian flew on his sword. He raised his speed to the limit. Everywhere he passed, sword chi tore through the starry sky. It was incomparably terrifying. In Yi Xian's body the blood was boiling, his whole body seemed to be on fire. Soon Yi Xian arrived in front of a black hole. He turned into a sword light and entered the black hole. Boom. The entire black hole shook violently, sword chi tore through the black hole. Soon Yi Xian showed up in a starry sky. As soon as he showed up in this starry sky, he felt all of his cultivation had disappeared. But his bloodline power was still there. The great Tao law could suppress his cultivation, but it could not suppress his bloodline power. At this moment, A middle-aged man suddenly appeared not far from Yi Xian. Human Venerable. One of the 3 great venerables of the Dark Abyss. On the right side of the human venerable was Nian Nian. Yi Xian's gaze fell on Nian Nian. Nian Nian kept crying, I'm sorry. Yi Xian shook his head. You're not sorry. I'm sorry. Don't be afraid, even if I die, I'll be with you, okay? Nian Nian lowered her head slightly, her body trembling. She clenched her fists tightly, nails digging into her palms, blood flowing. Human Venerable looked at Yi Xian. Just you? Yi Xian nodded. Yes. Human Venerable looked at Yi Xian. Where's the Tao scripture? Yi Xian said, let her go. Human Venerable shook his head. You're not qualified to negotiate with me. Yi Xian looked at Human Venerable. If you don't let her go, don't even think about getting the Tao scripture. You can kill her because before I came I was already prepared to die. But if you die like this, the 6 Tao scriptures will fall into the hands of ancient God Abyss. Human Venerable chuckled. Threatening me? I won't kill her, I'll torture her until you hand over the Tao scripture. Let's see who's more patient. With that said, he suddenly placed his right hand on Nian Nian's head. A powerful force enveloped her. Following that, Nian Nian's entire face twisted. Because her bones were being crushed bit by bit, Nian Nian was in extreme pain. But she did not cry. She looked at Yi Xian, forcing a smile that was uglier than crying. Don't hurt. Chapter 1421. It doesn't hurt? Venerable Human looked at Nian Nian and smiled. How interesting. It seems that not only does he care about you, you also care about him. Saying that, he was about to exert force, but at this time, Yi Xian suddenly opened his palm. In his palm there were 6 Tao scriptures. Venerable Human looked at Yi Xian, the corners of his mouth slightly raised, his smile bright. Have you lost your patience? Yi Xian's expression was calm. Can you let her go? Venerable Human released Mu Nian Nian. He slowly walked towards Yi Xian, smiling. Yi Xian, do you know? When you appeared in this place, I suddenly realized that I overestimated you. You have guts, you have intelligence, and you have strength. Unfortunately, you are not ruthless enough. You may be ruthless enough to your enemies, but you are not ruthless enough to your own people. What you don't know is that your so-called loyalty is meaningless because these are your weaknesses that your enemies can exploit. Yi Xian suddenly bent his finger. The 6 Tao scriptures appeared in front of Venerable Human, and he himself appeared in front of Nian Nian. Venerable Human put away the 6 Tao scriptures. He glanced at Yi Xian but did not stop Yi Xian. In this place he was invincible. Yi Xian gently hugged Nian Nian, but with this hug Nian Nian suddenly sucked in a breath of cold air. She looked at Yi Xian, tears streaming down her face, feeling wronged. It hurts. Yi Xian quickly let go. He gently grabbed Nian Nian's hand. Looking at Nian Nian's broken bones, his heart felt like it was being twisted by a knife. I'm sorry. Nian Nian looked at Yi Xian, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, I still can't remember the past. I'm too useless. How ridiculous. At this time, the distant Venerable Human suddenly laughed. It's really ridiculous. 5th Dimension Tendo, although I don't know your true strength, you were able to injure a Tao completion realm expert with less than 30% of your strength, so you must have some skill. What's laughable is that, for the sake of this Yi Xian and that so-called 5-dimensional universe, you didn't even use 70% of your strength until your death. For an expert like you to not sever the karma that binds you, I can only say that you're really stupid. Nian Nian looked at Yi Xian. Will we die? Yi Xian gently caressed Nian Nian's cheek and smiled. Are you afraid? Nian Nian shook her head. With you around, I'm not afraid. Yi Xian suddenly said, Can I kiss you? Nian Nian blinked. Kiss me. Yi Xian nodded. Nian Nian's face was slightly red, and her voice was as soft as a mosquito. Just once. Yi Xian said seriously, You agreed. You can't hit me in the future. Nian Nian slowly closed her eyes, feeling a little shy. Kiss me. I won't hit you in the future. Yi Xian leaned over and gently touched Nian Nian's forehead. They separated at the touch. Nian Nian opened her eyes and glanced at Yi Xian. Is it over? Yi Xian nodded. It's over. However, I'm a little regretful. Nian Nian blinked. Why? Yi Xian looked at Nian Nian and said seriously, If we can survive today, I think I'll definitely be beaten by you in the future. However, it doesn't matter. Who knows if there's a tomorrow? With that, he leaned over and gently touched Nian Nian's forehead. Even if I'm gone, You have to live well, understand? With that, he suddenly stored Nian Nian into the creation gourd. He grabbed the creation gourd and threw it toward the exit of the mortal world. He roared, "Take her away. To the four-dimensional universe's netherworld palace." Not far away, the human venerable suddenly laughed. "Let her go. Are you kidding me?" With that, he was about to make a move. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of him. In the next moment, an extremely powerful bloodline power swept out from his body. Boom. In an instant, a killing intent swept across the heaven and earth. This place had the laws of darkness which could suppress one's cultivation. However, it could not suppress Yi Xian's bloodline. Seeing that Yi Xian could actually use the power of his bloodline, the human venerable frowned. How is this possible? At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly slashed forward. It was not a Dao sword because he could not use a Dao sword at all. He also could not use a Dao seal. This place could even suppress a Dao seal. To put it simply, other than the power of his bloodline and his Dao body, he could not use any other power or external objects. The sword slashed down. The sword stopped half an inch away from the human venerable's head. The human venerable's 2 fingers caught Yi Xian's sword. The human venerable looked at Yi Xian. "I underestimated your bloodline power." With that, he slightly tightened his fingers. Boom. In an instant, Yi Xian was blasted hundreds of feet away. After repelling Yi Xian with 1 finger, the human venerable suddenly turned his head and looked in the direction where the gourd of fortune escaped. At present, compared to Yi Xian, Mu Nian was a greater threat. The human venerable was about to make a move when a sword chi slashed at him from behind. The human venerable frowned. He suddenly turned around and took a step forward. At the same time, he punched out. Before Yi Xian's sword fell, the human venerable's fist had already landed on his chest. Bang! Yi Xian spat out a mouthful of blood and was instantly sent flying thousands of feet away. However, in the next moment he once again rushed toward the human venerable with his sword. The blood-red sword light tore through the space. The blood-red light was overwhelming. In the distance, the human venerable slowly clenched his right hand. His eyes were filled with cold killing intent. "It's time to end this." With that said, he suddenly disappeared. In the field, the space suddenly cracked. In the next moment, a shadow directly hit Yi Xian. Boom. The sword light around Yi Xian was directly smashed. At the same time, Yi Xian was sent flying. As soon as he stopped, the human venerable suddenly appeared in front of him. The human venerable directly punched at Yi Xian's throat. Yi Xian blocked with his sword. Boom. Once again, Yi Xian and his sword were sent flying. In the air, the human venerable punched again. As the punch was thrown, the space cracked inch by inch. In the distance, a fist suddenly landed on Yi Xian's chest. Puff! Yi Xian suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood and was thrown backward. The human venerable looked at Yi Xian and sneered. "The legendary Daoist body. If it was outside, it might be a little tricky. Unfortunately, it's here. Today, let me shatter your Daoist body." As his voice fell, he rushed forward and punched. The punch was like a flash flood, unstoppable. In the distance, Yi Xian's pupils suddenly shrank. He did not choose to defend. Instead, he stabbed with his sword. A life for a life. However, the human venerable's speed was much faster than his. The moment he attacked with his sword, the human venerable's fist had already landed on his chest. Bang! Yi Xian's chest caved in. At the same time, the human venerable's powerful strength directly sent him flying. Although the Daoist body was strong at this moment, his cultivation was suppressed. His strength was less than half of his peak. Especially, he could not use a killer move like the Daoist sword. It could be said that he was being suppressed by the human venerable in both speed and strength. After sending Yi Xian flying with a punch, the human venerable did not stop. Instead, he took a step forward and threw a punch with each step. The punch was like a volcanic eruption, destroying heaven and earth. In the distance, Yi Xian's eyes flashed with anger. He held the executing heaven sword with both hands and slashed forward. At this moment, the human venerable's punch arrived. Boom! The surrounding space trembled. The human venerable's powerful punch directly sent the sword in Yi Xian's hand flying. At the same time, a destructive force instantly landed on Yi Xian's body. Bang! Yi Xian was instantly sent flying thousands of feet away. As soon as he stopped, he spat out several mouthfuls of blood. At the same time, his body had already split open. If this was outside, his body could continuously repair itself. But here his cultivation was suppressed and he could not repair his body at all. The human venerable slowly walked toward Zhou Xian. He slowly clenched his right hand and a powerful force gathered in his palm. Because the force was so strong, the space around him directly trembled. In the distance, Zhou Xian wiped the blood from his mouth. He looked at the exit in the distance and said softly, "She should be safe now." He knew that as long as Immortal Gourd brought Nian to the Netherworld Hall, even the Dark Abyss could not do anything to her. Thinking of this, the corner of Zhou Xian's mouth curled up into a smile. But soon the smile froze. At the exit he saw a person. Nian. In Nian's hand was a gourd. Immortal Gourd. Seeing Nian, the human venerable was stunned for a moment. Then he laughed. How interesting. In the distance Zhou Xian's eyes widened. Immortal Gourd. What the hell are you doing? At this moment, Immortal Gourd appeared in front of Zhou Xian with Nian. At the same time, Immortal Gourd's voice sounded in Zhou Xian's mind. Sai, you can't blame me. I want to take her away too. But she won't go. If I take her away by force she will kill herself. I really can't help it. It's too King difficult for me. Zhou Xian roared angrily. Your current strength far surpasses hers. Can't you stop her from killing herself? Immortal Gourd was a little helpless. I can beat her now, but she threatened me. She said that if I take her away when she regains her memory she will tear me to pieces. You know how terrifying she was at her peak. I'm scared. He had been beaten by Mu Nian in the past. He was really afraid of Mu Nian. Zhou Xian was speechless. Nian stared at Zhou Xian. You said you wouldn't lie to me. Zhou Xian felt a little guilty. I didn't lie to you. Nian said angrily, you left me alone. Zhou Xian shrugged. You did the same thing in the past. Nian burst into tears. After crying for a while she looked up at Zhou Xian. Then we're even. Now no one can leave the other, okay? Zhou Xian was silent. Nian looked at Zhou Xian. I don't want to live alone. Zhou Xian was silent for a moment. He took Nian's hand and said softly, okay. No one can leave the other. Nian smiled through her tears. She gently hugged Zhou Xian and said in a trembling voice, I'm afraid of death, but I'm even more afraid of living alone. Don't leave me. At this moment the human venerable in the distance suddenly said, Zhou Xian, where's the woman in the plain dress behind you? Zhou Xian looked at the human venerable. The human venerable smiled and said, isn't she your path protector? Why hasn't she appeared at a time like this? Don't tell me she's afraid. Zhou Xian was about to speak. At this moment the space in the distance was suddenly torn apart. The next moment 2 women walked out of the torn space. Seeing the 2 women, Zhou Xian was stunned. He knew one of them. It was Zhang Wenxiu. But he didn't know the woman next to Zhang Wenxiu. The human venerable's gaze fell on the woman next to Zhang Wenxiu. You're not the woman in the plain dress. The woman smiled and said, you seem a little disappointed. The human venerable smiled and said, I am indeed a little disappointed. Because we prepared a big gift for her. Unfortunately she didn't come. What a pity. But it's okay, we can kill her in the future. Kill her. The woman blinked and in the next moment she suddenly disappeared. The human venerable's expression changed. He suddenly punched out. The power of the punch was like a mountain flood, shaking the heaven and earth. However, as soon as he punched out, a jade white hand grabbed his throat. One hit kill. The human venerable's expression changed. He looked at the woman and said in horror, you're not suppressed. How is that possible? The woman looked at the human venerable and smiled. Kill my great mandate? You idiot, I can't even take one of her sword. You want to kill her? I'll kill your mother. I'll kill your mother. Then she suddenly clenched her fist. Boom. The human venerable's head exploded and turned into nothingness. Zhou Xian. P.S. I want to be scolded. Chapter 1422. Zhou Xian had to admit that even he was shocked. An instant kill. This woman killed a human venerable in an instant. What level was this human venerable? She was a cultivator above the Dao attainment realm. Such a cultivator was killed by this woman in an instant. This was too terrifying. At this moment, Zhang Wenxiu was also extremely shocked. She knew that the woman who came with her was very strong, but she didn't expect her to be this strong. As if thinking of something, Zhang Wenxiu's pupils shrank. This woman said that she couldn't even take one strike from the woman in the plain dress. The woman in the plain dress. How strong was she? Zhang Wenxiu's heart was in turmoil. Not far away, the woman clapped her hands and turned to look at Yi Xian. I've been traveling for a few days and I only killed this piece of trash. Don't you feel ashamed? Yi Xian, Zhang Wenxiu hurriedly said, Auntie, you've worked hard. Yi Xian was stunned, then looked at Zhang Wenxiu. Your auntie? Zhang Wenxiu said in a low voice. What's mine is also yours. Yi Xian. The woman walked to Yi Xian and looked at Yi Xian. To be precise, I'm your auntie. Yi Xian blinked. Are there second aunties and third aunties? The woman nodded. Yes. Yi Xian, Zhang Wenxiu, Yi Xian said in a low voice. My mother and auntie Yu, the woman smiled. We call your mother sisters. As for your mother, I can't say much. You'll know in the future. Yi Xian was speechless. In the future again. The woman looked around and said, This place is a little special. As she spoke, she looked at Yi Xian. This clone of mine is about to disappear. You'll have to deal with the rest yourself. Yi Xian asked in a deep voice. Aunt, where is your main body? The woman smiled. I'm busy. Yi Xian asked again. Is it far from here? The woman nodded. It's very far. Most importantly, some of the rules are very troublesome and we don't want to break them. In short, it's quite troublesome for us to come here. Yi Xian said in a deep voice. The Nether Pavilion. The woman smiled and said, You only guessed it now? Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. I guessed it. But I'm not sure. The woman looked at Yi Xian. You said you were an orphan in the Netherworld Hall and had no one to rely on. Kid, I'm here today to tell you two things. First, it's not that your father doesn't care about you. He has done a lot for you, but you don't know about it. Second, you think your enemies are strong now, but you don't know that your enemies in the future are even stronger. Just like me. Do you think I'm strong? Yi Xian quickly nodded. The woman smiled. But the Nether Pavilion is in a dangerous moment. The reason why my main body didn't come this time is because of this. Yi Xian fell silent. The woman patted Yi Xian's shoulder lightly. This is the last time we'll help you because we're not sure if we can survive. You're on your own. After saying that, her body gradually turned illusory. Yi Xian bowed slightly to the woman. And thank you. The woman smiled. We're family, no need to be so polite. As she spoke, she looked at Nian Nian, who was beside Yi Xian. Nian Nian hesitated for a moment before saying softly, Aunt. The woman laughed. I don't deserve that. Yi Xian quickly said, Aunt, can you help Nian Nian recover her memory? The woman shook her head. No. Yi Xian was slightly puzzled. Why not? The woman looked at Yi Xian and smiled. Can I not answer this question? Yi Xian was speechless. The woman thought for a moment and said, Forget it. I'll answer you. The reason why I can't help her recover her memory is because she's too strong. I can't stop her. As she spoke, she glanced at Nian Nian. She's an extraordinary woman. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Too strong. The woman smiled. Her sword Dao is the strongest besides those three. That's not right. That girl Tingyun should be on par with her. However, your sister Nian's strength isn't just in her sword Dao. In short, she has her own Dao. This chapter is not over. Please continue to the next page. Moreover, she's very strong. Ordinary people can't forcefully interfere with what she does. So let nature take its course. In any case, she has no intention of harming you. Yi Xian wanted to ask more, but the woman had already vanished. She left in a carefree manner. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian left with Zhang Wenxiu and Nian Nian. Of course, Yi Xian did not forget the 6 Dao scriptures. When the woman killed the human supremacy, he had already kept them. Not long after Yi Xian and the others left, a middle-aged man suddenly appeared in the mortal world. The middle-aged man looked around and said softly, I'm late. This person was one of the 3 supremacies of the Dark Abyss, the Earth Supremacy. Previously, when the human supremacy's soul tablet shattered, he rushed over here. Unfortunately, he was still too late. The Earth Supremacy looked around with a solemn expression. Good one, Yi Xian. Looks like we've underestimated you. After saying that, his figure trembled slightly and disappeared. In the 5th dimension. When Yi Xian and the others returned to the 5th dimension, Su Zhe and Suku immediately appeared in front of Yi Xian. Su Zhe looked at Yi Xian and said, Little friend, that human supremacy. Yi Xian said, He's dead. Dead. Su Zhe looked at Yi Xian and asked, Then Senior killed him? Yi Xian nodded. Suja was silent. One of the three supremacies of the Dark Abyss, human supremacy, was dead. Xian looked at Suja and asked, Senior, how can I reach the Dao realm? Suja shook his head. You can't. Xian frowned slightly. Why? Suja sighed softly. Little friend, you've just broken through not long ago. It's not wise to force your way into the Dao realm now. Moreover, you haven't fully stabilized your Dao defense realm. It's not suitable for you to break through to the Dao realm. Xian was silent. Suja continued, Of course, if you borrow the power of the God's Seal, it's not impossible. However, I don't recommend you to use the God's Seal. You're a genius, you can definitely create your own path. Xian said softly, I don't have that much time. The human supremacy's sudden attack made him understand that the Dark Abyss was determined to kill him and Yan. He didn't think that the death of the human supremacy would make the Dark Abyss stop. Not only would the Dark Abyss not stop, but it would also intensify. Suja hesitated for a moment and then said, Little friend, why don't you come with us to the ancient God Abyss? Little friend, don't worry. If you go to the ancient God Abyss, even if the Dark Abyss Master personally takes action, the ancient God Abyss will protect you. Xian shook his head. If he left this place, the entire fifth dimension would be completely destroyed. The fifth dimension could not stop the Dark Abyss. Suja sighed softly when he saw that Xian didn't want to go to the ancient God Abyss. Xian wasn't willing to give up the fifth dimension, so he would always be in a passive position. At this moment, Xianchu suddenly appeared in front of Xian. She looked at Xian and said, Let me tell you some bad news. The Xianhuan sect from the Whirling World has sent people. Xian frowned slightly. The Xianhuan sect? Xianchu nodded. A super sect from the Whirling World. They came this time for the Dao scripture in your possession. Xian was silent. He hadn't expected the forces from the Whirling World to come so quickly. Xianchu suddenly asked, Who was that woman? Xian looked at Xianchu. Hi, Aunt. Xianchu. Xian asked, Miss Xianchu, how many people from the Xianhuan sect have come? Xianchu shook her head. I don't know. But we should know soon. Because they should have already arrived. Xian nodded. Thank you, Miss Xianchu, for telling me. After saying that, he turned around and left with Yan. Xianchu looked at Xian, not knowing what she was thinking. Somewhere in the main hall, Xian sat cross-legged on the ground and slowly closed his eyes. If it wasn't for the help of the Netherworld Hall, would he and Yan have survived? Of course not. Moreover, he also discovered that powerhouses above the enlightened Dao realm could pose a threat to his Daoist body. Improve his Dao body? This thought flashed through Xian's mind, but he quickly rejected it. Previously, he had relied on the gift from the Jiaolong Dragon clan to improve his Dao body. Now, if he didn't have an opportunity, it would be impossible for him to improve his Dao body. Whether it was his realm or his body, he couldn't improve them for the time being. After a while, Xian said softly, It seems that I can only take it step by step. Xian no longer thought about improving his Dao body. Instead, he began to stabilize his Dao body. This chapter is not finished. Please continue. As Suja had said, he hadn't even fully understood the Dao controlling realm. He really shouldn't think about the Dao attainment realm. Somewhere in the starry sky, the earthly venerable Dark Abyss looked down at the five-dimensional universe. Beside him was the Ancestral Master. The Ancestral Master's expression was extremely solemn. He didn't expect the human venerable to die just like that. And he died in the mortal world. What did this mean? It meant that the other party wasn't suppressed by the dark Dao laws of the mortal world. The earthly venerable suddenly said, Did you find out where that woman came from? The Ancestral Master shook his head. I couldn't find out. The earthly venerable frowned slightly. You couldn't find out? The Ancestral Master nodded. She seemed to have appeared out of thin air. The earthly venerable was silent. After a while, the earthly venerable looked down. I have already informed the celestial venerable that he will rush here in 3 days. Hearing this, the Ancestral Master was shocked. Is the celestial venerable going to make a move? The earthly venerable was expressionless. The person behind Xian is more powerful than we thought. The Ancestral Master said in a low voice. Besides that, there is also the ancient God Abyss. They are determined to help Xian. The earthly venerable frowned. What is their purpose in doing this? The Ancestral Master sighed softly. The current situation is becoming more and more disadvantageous for us. The earthly venerable shook his head. You are wrong. The ancestral master looked at the earthly venerable. The earthly venerable said softly, as far as I know, many sects in the whirling world have already sent people to the five-dimensional universe. And their goal is that Tao scripture. In other words, Zhou Xian's enemies will only increase. We can wait and see for now. The ancestral master was about to speak when a shadow suddenly appeared in the distant sky above the Tao city. The next moment, a powerful aura suddenly enveloped the entire Tao city. The earthly venerable chuckled. Look, the experts of the whirling world have arrived. There's going to be a good show to watch. In the distant sky above the Tao city, Zhou Xian suddenly appeared in front of the shadow. The shadow gradually became solid. It was a middle-aged man. The Tao realm. The middle-aged man looked at Zhou Xian. You are Zhou Xian. Zhou Xian nodded. Yes. The middle-aged man laughed. Since ancient times the treasures of heaven and earth belong to the strong. You are so weak, how can you have the nerve to occupy the 6 Tao scriptures? Zhou Xian suddenly took out the 6 scrolls of the Tao scripture. He placed them in front of himself and then looked at the middle-aged man. Senior, you are right. How about this? Senior, lower your cultivation level and fight with me. If you win, I will give these 6 scrolls to you. What do you think? The middle-aged man laughed. How interesting. A Tao manipulation realm cultivator wants to challenge me? Zhou Xian looked at the middle-aged man. I have fought with experts above the Dark Abyss realm. They are very strong. I am no match for them. The middle-aged man shook his head. Oh no. It is not that they are strong but that you are too weak. Zhou Xian said in a low voice. Senior, they are experts from the Dark Abyss. The middle-aged man chuckled. Dark Abyss? What kind of rubbish place is that? How dare they compare to my whirling world? On the other side, the earthly venerable was expressionless. No one knew what he was thinking. The ancestral master's face was a little gloomy. The middle-aged man suddenly said, Fine, I will lower my realm and fight with you. You. At this moment, the earthly venerable's voice suddenly sounded in the sky. Sir, although Zhou Xian is only at the Tao manipulation realm, his combat strength can kill those who have achieved the Tao. Especially when he has a divine item doubting. The middle-aged man looked at the earthly venerable in the sky and smiled. You are from the Dark Abyss, right? The earthly venerable nodded. Yes. I am the Dark Abyss human venerable. The middle-aged man shook his head with a smile. Do you know what it means to be a frog at the bottom of a well? The earthly venerable looked at the middle-aged man without saying a word. The middle-aged man smiled. Zhou Xian thinks that the experts from the Dark Abyss are strong because he is weak. He is a frog at the bottom of a well. He has not seen many Tao attainment realm cultivators, so he thinks that you are strong. You think that Zhou Xian is not weak because you are weak. An expert above the Tao attainment realm can't even kill a Tao manipulation realm youth. I can only say that you are useless. Very, very useless. At this point he shook his head with a smile. To think that the master of dark scripture was also a figure back then. Why are his descendants so useless? In the sky, the earthly venerable was silent. Beside him, the ancestral master's face was frighteningly gloomy. At this moment, the middle-aged man suddenly looked at the earthly venerable and said, As far as I know, the doubting has a divine item called the Seal of Tao. This item was the most precious treasure of the doubting back then. You said that Zhou Xian has a divine item. Could it be this item? If it is this item, I have to be careful. The earthly venerable looked at the middle-aged man calmly. The Seal of Tao. How could he have such a divine item? The divine item I am talking about is the sword in his hand, not the Seal of Tao. Sir, you can rest assured. Go. Zhou Xian. End of this chapter. Chapter 1423. Sword. The middle-aged man looked at the executing heaven sword in Zhou Xian's hand when he heard the earthly venerable. He shook his head and smiled. While this sword isn't bad, that's all there is to it. As he spoke, he opened his palm and pressed it down lightly. In an instant, his realm was suppressed from the Tao attainment realm to the Tao attainment realm. As if he'd thought of something, the middle-aged man looked up at the earthly venerable. I'll show all of you what a true expert is. As he spoke, he pressed his right hand down once more. In an instant, he went from the Tao attainment realm to the Tao attainment realm. In the sky, the earthly venerable shook his head after a moment of silence. The world is vast and anything can happen. The ancestral master was speechless. Below, the middle-aged man looked at Zhou Xian. This isn't bullying you, right? Zhou Xian hesitated for a moment before he said, Senior, do you dare to suppress it to the Dao attainment realm? The crowd was speechless. The middle-aged man looked at Zhou Xian. The Dao attainment realm? Zhou Xian nodded. I don't mean anything else. I just want to see how strong experts above the Dao attainment realm are. If Senior can defeat me at the Dao attainment realm, then Zhou Xian will truly be convinced. The middle-aged man chuckled. Zhou Xian, do you think I'm stupid? Zhou Xian was speechless. The middle-aged man smiled. While I'm confident, I know that it's better to be safe than sorry. It's better to be careful when you're outside. So, are you going to fight or not? Zhou Xian nodded. Yes. He vanished on the spot as soon as he finished speaking. A strand of sword light tore through the battlefield. It was a swift strike. Originally, the middle-aged man had a hint of vigilance in his eyes. Although he was confident as he said, he was still very cautious. However, when he saw Zhou Xian's sword, that trace of vigilance suddenly disappeared. This sword was very fast, but to him it was too weak. The middle-aged man shook his head and smiled. That's it. As he spoke, he blasted a punch forward. At this moment, Zhou Xian's sword momentum suddenly changed. The originally ordinary sword became a Dao sword. At this moment, the middle-aged man's expression changed drastically. Because at this moment he sensed danger. Originally he was about to attack, but he suddenly switched to defense. He crossed his arms and fiercely pushed them forward. At the same time, he stopped suppressing his cultivation level. However, Zhou Xian's sword had already descended. Boom! In front of everyone's eyes, the middle-aged man was sent flying by Zhou Xian's sword. In the process, the middle-aged man's fleshly body crumbled inch by inch. When he reappeared 10,000 feet away, only his soul remained. After Zhou Xian pushed the middle-aged man back, he immediately pointed his finger and the soul-suppressing sword suddenly flew out. Right at this moment, the middle-aged man's soul suddenly vanished into the horizon. At the same time, a furious shout resounded from the horizon. Despicable! Shameless! Despicable! Shameless! Yi Jun have never seen such a despicable and shameless person. Zhou Xian was speechless. On the other side, Xianchu shook her head. Beside her, the old man shook his head. This Yi Jun is really a weirdo. Xianchu said softly. The Dao scripture and martial arts civilization began in the whirling world. From the beginning, when we faced the five-dimensional universe, we had the mentality of being superior to others. Let alone the five-dimensional universe, even when facing the dark abyss and ancient god abyss, we have the same mentality. However, whether it is the five-dimensional universe or the dark abyss, they are actually not weak. The old man was silent. In fact, when facing Zhou Xian at the beginning, he did not pay too much attention to Zhou Xian. At that time in his heart, Zhou Xian was just not bad. But now it seemed that this Zhou Xian was not only not bad. Not to mention the five-dimensional universe, even if Zhou Xian was placed in the whirling world. This chapter is not finished, please continue. But he was definitely the top existence of the younger generation. As if thinking of something, the old man shook his head and sighed. This young Master Yi is too good at pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger. He still could not forget how Zhou Xian had shown weakness when they had just arrived. A person's strength was not scary. What was scary was when he hid his strength. At this moment, Xianchu suddenly said, "When will Master arrive?" The old man said in a low voice, "In 2 days." Xianchu nodded slightly. She looked at Zhou Xian in the distance, thinking about something. In the distance, Zhou Xian looked up at the terrestrial venerable, and the terrestrial venerable was also looking at Zhou Xian. He had to admit that Zhou Xian's strength surprised him. Although Yi Jun had suppressed his cultivation by 2 realms, his foundation was still there. However, he still could not take a blow from Zhou Xian. One could imagine that if Zhou Xian reached enlightenment, he would definitely be invincible among his peers. All along, the focus of the Dark Abyss had been on the forces behind Zhou Xian and the ancient God Abyss, thus neglecting Zhou Xian himself. In fact, Zhou Xian himself was also very scary. This kind of person must be killed as an enemy. Zhou Xian looked at the terrestrial venerable and smiled. Do you want to know how the human venerable died? The terrestrial venerable narrowed his eyes. Are you threatening me? Zhou Xian smiled and turned to leave. In the sky, the terrestrial venerable stared at Zhou Xian. How did the human venerable die? In fact, the death of the human venerable was not scary. What was scary was that the human venerable died in the mortal world. What did this mean? It meant that the woman who killed the human venerable was not suppressed by the dark way law of the mortal world. An abyss had met someone who could ignore the dark way law of the mortal world. That woman had caused an abyss to suffer great losses. At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded beside him. Netherworld Hall. The terrestrial venerable turned to see a woman standing beside him. The woman wore a simple black dress. The black dress was as black as ink and exuded a sense of oppression. Celestial Venerable. The ancestral master hurriedly bowed. Greetings, Celestial Venerable. The Celestial Venerable nodded. Beside her, the terrestrial venerable said, Big sister, you came early. The Celestial Venerable said softly, Third brother is dead. How could I not come early? The terrestrial venerable was silent. The Celestial Venerable looked at the terrestrial venerable. You don't look sad at all. The terrestrial venerable shook her head. There is no point in being sad. The Celestial Venerable smiled. Indeed. Then she looked down. I have found out that the person who helped him is from a force called Netherworld Hall in the fourth dimension. The terrestrial venerable frowned. Netherworld Hall? Why have I never heard of it? The Celestial Venerable said softly, a very ancient force and very mysterious. They appeared in the fourth dimension but for some reason they disappeared. The terrestrial venerable said in a low voice, Disappeared? Did they leave? The Celestial Venerable nodded. They left. As for where they went, I don't know. But for now they are a very scary group of people. The terrestrial venerable asked, Why do you think so? The Celestial Venerable looked at the terrestrial venerable. Do you know why that woman disappeared after killing the human venerable? Without waiting for the terrestrial venerable to answer, the Celestial Venerable said, Because what she came was just a clone. Clone. The terrestrial venerable's pupils suddenly shrank. This, the Celestial Venerable smiled. A clone in the mortal world ignored the great Tao nomological laws left by Dark Ancestor and killed the human venerable. Don't you find it very unbelievable? The terrestrial venerable said in a low voice, This is too scary. This chapter is not finished. Please turn the page. The Celestial Venerable said softly, There is something even scarier. The terrestrial venerable looked at the Celestial Venerable. What? The Celestial Venerable looked down. He encountered the Naga race. As far as I know, the last patriarch of the Naga race was suppressed in the Dark World by that person. I have been to the Dark World. That old patriarch has fallen, which means that the Almighty has taken action. However, Zhou Xian left the Dark World with the granddaughter of the Naga race's old patriarch. There are two possibilities. The first is that the Almighty let Zhou Xian and Naga go, which is basically impossible. The second is... At this point she did not continue. The terrestrial venerable said in a low voice. The second is that the person behind Zhou Xian protected Zhou Xian and Naga. The Celestial Venerable nodded. Yes. If someone really protected him, then we have to re-evaluate the strength of the force behind him. The terrestrial venerable suddenly asked, Big sister, do you know that plain-dressed woman? The Celestial Venerable was silent. The terrestrial venerable frowned slightly. Why? The Celestial Venerable said softly, Mysterious and powerful. The terrestrial venerable asked, How powerful? The Celestial Venerable laughed lightly. Do you know why the ancient god Abyss is so determined to help Zhou Xian? The terrestrial venerable said in a low voice, Because of the plain-dressed woman. The Celestial Venerable nodded. According to my investigation, the plain-dressed woman has been to the ancient god Abyss. However, I do not know what happened there. But what is certain is that the ancient god Abyss is so determined to protect Zhou Xian. Even Suja has come personally. This must have something to do with the plain-dressed woman. And for the ancient god Abyss to help Zhou Xian at all costs, either the plain-dressed woman has made a deal with them, or they want to form a good relationship with the plain-dressed woman. If it is the latter, it means that the plain-dressed woman's strength is beyond our imagination. The terrestrial venerable was silent, his expression solemn. The Celestial Venerable said again, There is one more thing. Zhou Xian has swallowed the blood of the Naga Dragon clan. His body has the power of the Naga Dragon clan. The blood of the Naga Dragon clan is unyielding and domineering. Not to mention among humans, even among the demonic beasts, it is at the top of the pyramid. However, Zhou Xian can swallow their blood. What does this mean? It means that the power of Yi Xian's bloodline is above that of the Naga Dragon clan. No, it should be far beyond the Naga Dragon clan. However, we know nothing about the origin of the power of his bloodline. The terrestrial venerable shook his head. This person is too mysterious. The celestial venerable looked down at the Dao city. Doubting ancestor Zhao Jiqing made him the Dao master after meeting him. There are two reasons. First, he took a fancy to him. Of course, he is indeed a rare genius. But I don't think Zhao Jiqing made him the Dao master and gave him the Dao seal just because of this. The terrestrial venerable said in a low voice, the force behind him. The celestial venerable nodded. Must be. Apart from that, this person is also related to Situ Tingyun. There must be an extremely mysterious and powerful force behind him. And these people might not belong to our world. The terrestrial venerable frowned slightly. Do we have a chance of winning? The celestial venerable shook his head. Judging from the strength displayed by Situ Tingyun and the woman from the Netherworld Hall, we have no chance of winning. The terrestrial venerable said in a low voice, are we going to give up? The celestial venerable smiled. No. The terrestrial venerable frowned slightly. Why? The celestial venerable said softly, because he might summon the spirit of the great path. We are destined to be enemies with him. With that she smiled slightly. It's not that we have no chance of winning. We have to play this game of chess well. After all, there are too many people who want the Dao scripture in his hands now. It's true that I and Yuan don't have a great chance of winning if I fight him alone. But why should we fight him alone? We can choose to fight him together, can't we? P.S. One ticket is too few. Can we vote for a few more? End of this chapter. Chapter 1424. Yi Xian returned to his room. In front of him was the soul-quelling sword. The soul-quelling sword had not broken through, but she had reached a critical point. If she had absorbed Yi Jun's soul, she would have broken through. Unfortunately, Yi Jun had escaped. Yi Jun's escape also made Yi Xian understand that experts above the Dao attainment realm were not so easy to kill. After a long silence, Yi Xian suddenly kept the soul-quelling sword and left. As for Nian Nian, she was still in the prison pagoda. It was too dangerous for her to be out there. One must know that the person in Yuan was truly afraid of was not Yi Xian, but Nian Nian. Yi Xian arrived in the starry sky of the fifth dimension. Suja was in this starry sky. Suja did not leave with his people. If he did, the experts from Yuan would definitely come out in full force. That was not something the fifth dimension could fight against. Seeing Yi Xian, Suja smiled faintly. Young friend, you managed to injure Yi Jun with a single strike. With such strength, not to mention the fifth dimension, even in the whirling world among the younger generation, you are considered a top existence. Yi Xian shook his head. Senior must be joking. I was able to injure Yi Jun because he underestimated me and lowered his realm. If not for that, I'm afraid I would not be his opponent. Suja's eyes flashed with surprise. Yi Xian had destroyed Yi Jun's body with a single strike, but he did not feel complacent. This surprised him. Yi Xian cupped his fists. Thank you for your help. I, Yi Xian, am eternally grateful. Suja collected his thoughts and smiled. And Yuan's enemy is my ancient god Abyss's friend. Yi Xian hesitated, then said, Senior has seen Qing, the woman in the plain dress. The smile on Suja's face gradually disappeared. He nodded slightly. Greetings, Senior. Yi Xian quickly asked, did she say anything? Suja smiled bitterly. When they first met that senior, she wanted to destroy the ancient god Abyss because their strength threatened Yi Xian. Suja shook his head and smiled. Little friend, she didn't say anything else. She just asked us not to hurt you. Yi Xian was speechless. Suja hesitated for a moment before asking, young friend, may I ask what is Senior's background? In fact, she had investigated Yi Xian and the plain-dressed woman. She knew a lot about Yi Xian, but she knew practically nothing about the plain-dressed woman. Too mysterious. What is Qing'er's background? Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. Actually, he didn't know either. He only knew that her name was Qing'er and that she was his relative. Other than that, he knew nothing about her background. Seeing that Yi Xian didn't answer, Suja didn't ask any further. That he changed the topic. Young friend, with Senior's strength, it shouldn't be difficult for her to destroy the ancient god Abyss. Why is she? Yi Xian sighed softly. Senior, don't you understand? She doesn't even care about the ancient god Abyss. Hearing this, Zhou Xian's face gradually became solemn. That's right. With senior strength, does she need to care about the ancient god abyss? Just like an elephant, does it need to care about an ant? At this moment, Zhou Xian asked again, Senior, you should know about the cause of misfortune, right? Zhou Xian nodded. Just as he was about to speak, he seemed to have thought of something. His pupils shrank abruptly. Young friend, do you mean to say that she is blocking the cause of misfortune for you? Zhou Xian nodded. Zhou Xian's expression became incomparably solemn. No wonder you were able to survive until now. I see. Zhou Xian suddenly asked, Senior, what is the realm above Dao attainment? Zhou Xian said in a low voice, Unity. Zhou Xian frowned slightly. Unity. Zhou Xian nodded. Unity of all laws, unity of all Daos. Experts who have reached this level can unite all laws and Daos in the world into one. Currently, whether it is the ancient god abyss or the ancient god abyss, experts of this level are few and far between. As for the Dao attainment realm, although there are many Dao attainment realm experts in the ancient god abyss, those who can truly attain Dao can be counted on one hand. Zhou Xian was a little puzzled. Truly attain Dao attainment realm? Zhou Xian nodded his head slightly. Every realm is divided into true and false. Some Dao attained realm cultivators are not as strong as they used to be. Just like Yi Jun, he was not as strong as he used to be. Could be said that his true strength was not even 60% of the Dao attained realm. If the other party is not as powerful, even if you suppress your realm, you may not be able to defeat him. Just like you, even if you suppress your realm to the Dao validation realm within the Dao validation realm, there are not many who can be your opponent. Zhou Xian nodded. I understand. Zhou Xian continued. The ancient god abyss has three venerables: the heavenly venerable, the earthly venerable, and the human venerable. All three are at the consolidation realm, but the heavenly venerable is the most terrifying, because she is the kind of consolidation that is not as powerful as before. Other than that, the ancient god abyss also has the yin-yang gods. These two have reached the peak of the consolidation realm tens of thousands of years ago. As for now, I'm afraid they are unfathomable. As he spoke, he looked at Zhou Xian. Young friend, I still want to advise you. Why don't you come with me to the ancient god abyss? There, the ancient god abyss can protect you. If you are in the fifth dimension, the ancient god abyss will not be able to help you. Zhou Xian said in a low voice. I appreciate Senior's kindness. But if I leave here, the ancient god abyss will definitely threaten me with the fifth dimension. I will not give up on the fifth dimension. Zhou Xian sighed softly. But forgive me for being blunt, young friend, with your current strength, there is no way you can fight against the ancient god abyss. Unless Miss Nian Nian regains her memory, or the person behind young friend appears. Zhou Xian was silent. When would Nian Nian regain her memory? He did not know. As for the Netherworld Temple, the current Netherworld Temple would not have time to care about him. It could be said that he could only face everything by himself. Zhou Xian collected his thoughts and looked at Zhou Xian. Senior, if I may be so bold as to ask a favor. Zhou Xian nodded. Young friend, please speak. Zhou Xian said in a low voice. Senior, I want you to stay in the fifth dimension for 3 months. I need 3 months. Zhou Xian was silent. Zhou Xian suddenly said, if I meet Qing in the future, if you have any questions or want to know, I can ask Qing on your behalf. Hearing this, Zhou Xian's expression changed. He cupped his fists and said, if that's the case, then this old man will thank you in advance. If he could ask the woman in the plain dress for advice, it would definitely be beneficial. A pointer from that kind of expert was equivalent to 10,000 years of hard work. Zhou Xian continued. Little friend, I will transfer 26 Dao completion experts to the fifth dimension. Apart from this, I will personally invite my master to the fifth dimension just in case. With him here, even if the heavenly sovereign personally takes action, he will not be able to do anything to you. Zhou Xian cupped his fists and said, many thanks. Zhou Xian smiled. Young friend, this old man also has a favor to ask. Zhou Xian smiled. Senior, please speak. Zhou Xian became serious. If you really manage to gather all the Dao scriptures in the future, I hope that you can borrow my ancient god's abyss to take a look. Is that possible? Zhou Xian smiled. Of course. Zhou Xian smiled. Thank you. After chatting with Zhou Xian for a while, Zhou Xian turned around and left. Zhou Xian also left the fifth dimension. From the current situation, he knew that even he could not control this place. Because not only was there the dark abyss, there was also the whirling world. It was really difficult. In the starry sky, Zhou Xian suddenly stopped in his tracks. Not far in front of him stood a woman. The Heavenly Venerables. Zhou Xian narrowed his eyes. I didn't expect the Heavenly Venerables to personally come forward. The Heavenly Venerables laughed. Zhou Xian, in my impression you are a cunning person. But this time, it doesn't seem worth it for you to help Xian. That doesn't seem like your style. Zhou Xian was expressionless. The enemy of the ancient god's abyss is the friend of the ancient god's abyss. The Heavenly Venerables shook his head and laughed. No. If I'm not wrong, you are helping him because of the woman behind him. Zhou Xian looked at the Heavenly Venerables and did not speak. The Heavenly Venerables' lips curled up. Zhou Xian, I am really curious. How strong is the woman in the plain dress? How could the ancient god's abyss spare no effort to help Xian? Zhou Xian laughed. It seems that you are also investigating the woman in the plain dress. He wanted to call him senior, but after thinking about it he decided not to. Why should he let the ancient god's abyss know how strong the woman in the plain dress was? Wouldn't it be better to let them do what they want? The Heavenly Venerables looked at Zhou Xian. As far as I know, the Whirling Sect, Shenhuan Sect, and the #1 aristocratic family, the Shao clan, have all sent people to the 5th dimension. In addition, the Whirling World's Xuanji Sect has already built a transmission array. Once the transmission array is completed, it will be much easier for the Whirling World to come to the 5th dimension. When that time comes, do you know what Xian will face? Oh yes, there is also the ancient god's abyss. Zhou Xian was silent. The Heavenly Venerables laughed. Zhou Xian, the ancient god's abyss is helping Xian. This is equivalent to making everyone your enemy. Zhou Xian laughed. So what? The Heavenly Venerables looked at Zhou Xian. After a moment of silence, she laughed. It seems that the woman in the plain dress is stronger than I thought. But do you think that she can deal with everyone? Zhou Xian looked at the Heavenly Venerables and laughed. Heavenly Venerables, since you have been persuading me for so long, I will also give you a word of advice. Whether it is the ancient god's abyss or the ancient god's abyss, it has not been easy for us to survive until now. The world itself is already very difficult. Why do we still have to work hard? Is the Tao scripture really that important? Is it not good to be alive? The Heavenly Venerables looked at Zhou Xian. How strong is she? Zhou Xian was silent. The Heavenly Venerables laughed. Let me rephrase my question. If I were to fight with her, what percentage would I have? Zhou Xian looked at the Heavenly Venerables. The Heavenly Venerables nodded. I should have some chance of winning, right? Zhou Xian was silent for a moment before replying. Let's make it 3-7. He 3, she 7. The Heavenly Venerables blinked. Really? Zhou Xian replied calmly. I have never lied to anyone before. The Heavenly Venerables laughed. I know. Thank you for telling me. After saying that, she turned and disappeared into the horizon. Zhou Xian said softly, the feeling of lying is so King satisfying. No wonder little friend ye likes to lie. Chapter 1425. The Five-Dimensional Universe. Inside the Sword Hall, Xian sat cross-legged on the ground. In front of him was Jiao Lu. He was currently teaching Jiao Lu the Tao scripture mantra. Jiao Lu also cultivated a Tao body, but she did not cultivate the Tao scripture mantra. Now he was teaching her the Tao scripture mantra without reservation. Jiao Lu's strength was the closest to the Tao attainment realm. If she cultivated the Tao scripture mantra, her strength would reach a terrifying level. For now, even Xian could not compare to her. After all, she was a member of the Dragon Clan and had a unique advantage. A moment later, Jiao Lu stood up and looked at Xian. Thank you. With that, she returned to the prison pagoda. After a moment of silence, Xian stood up and left the hall. At this time, Yi Jiming's voice sounded in his mind. What plans do you have next? Xian chuckled. What plans can I have? I can only take one step at a time. Yi Jiming said solemnly, we must let Nian recover her memory. Xian smiled bitterly. I also want to, but you know Nian's situation. She doesn't even know when she will recover her memory. After a moment of silence, Yi Jiming said, do you still remember what your aunt said? Xian asked. What did she say? Yi Jiming said solemnly, she said that she could not interfere with Nian's matters. In other words, Nian's memory loss might have been intentional. Xian frowned slightly. On purpose. Yi Jiming said, that's my guess. But why did she lose her memory? Is it because of the five-dimensional universe? But now that the five-dimensional universe has recovered, Xian was silent. In fact, he was also very puzzled. Why did Yen lose her memory? Did she not want to remember the past? That shouldn't be the case. At this time, a middle-aged man suddenly appeared in front of Xian. The moment this middle-aged man appeared, Venerable Me appeared behind Xian. Xian looked at the middle-aged man. From the Saga world. The middle-aged man smiled and said, "The great elder of the profound error sect, Li Qiuheng." Xian said with a smile, "Sire must have come for the Tao scripture." Li Qiuheng nodded. "Young Master Yi, before I came in, Yuan came looking for me. They wanted to cooperate with my Black Nebulous sect, but I didn't agree immediately." As he spoke, he looked at Xian and said with a smile, "Young Master Yi, do you know why I didn't agree immediately?" Xian shook his head, "I don't know." Li Qiuheng smiled and said, "Young Master Yi, you are a smart person. You should understand that with your strength and the strength of the fifth dimension, it is impossible to protect those Tao scriptures. If that's the case, why don't you hand it over and keep it safe?" Xian shook his head and smiled. "Sire, if I hand over the Tao scripture, will you really let me go?" Li Qiuheng looked at Xian. "If you are willing to hand it over, I can't guarantee anything else, but I can guarantee that my Black Nebulous sect will not be your enemy." Xian was silent. Li Qiuheng smiled and said, "I know that there is a powerful and mysterious force behind young Master Yi. However, young Master Yi, do you really think that the people behind you can fight against the major sects of the Saga world and in Yuan at the same time?" Xian didn't say anything. Li Qiuheng shook his head and smiled. "Young Master, you might not understand the Saga world. I can only tell you that any one of the top forces in the Saga world can easily destroy the entire fifth dimension." Xian thought about it and then said, "What Senior said makes sense. This Tao scripture is a disaster in the hands of me, Xian. However, I am a bit unwilling to hand it over like this." Li Qiuheng smiled and said, "It is normal to be unwilling. However, although treasures are good, life is more important, isn't it?" Xian smiled and said, "Senior, if I hand over the 6 Tao scriptures to you, will I get any benefits?" Li Qiuheng looked at Xian and said, "You still want benefits?" Xian chuckled and said, "If there are no benefits, who wouldn't I hand it over to? I don't necessarily have to hand it over to Senior, what do you think?" Li Qiuheng pointed at Xian and smiled. "Greedy. No, you want to use the Tao scripture to stall for time and buy time for yourself. Young Master Yi, do you really think that you can deal with our major forces? You're thinking too simply of us. We won't give you this opportunity. 5 days, if you don't hand over the Tao scripture in 5 days, we will make you and the entire fifth dimension disappear from this world. Of course, young Master Yi can also hurry up and call for reinforcements. If you are late, it will be too late." After saying that, he turned around and left. After taking a few steps, he suddenly stopped and turned to look at Xian and said, "I heard that the woman behind you is very strong?" Xian looked at Li Qiuheng and Li Qiuheng smiled and said, "If you are pinning your hopes on her, then let me tell you. In the future you will find out what a stupid idea this is." After saying that, he turned around and disappeared into the horizon. Just as Li Qiuheng disappeared, Xianchu appeared in front of Xian. Xianchu looked at Xian and said, "Don't mind it, the whirling world is the birthplace of the Tao scripture and martial arts civilization. The people there look at the people outside the universe like city people look at country people." Xian smiled and said, "I don't mind it at all. I am even a little happy." Xianchu looked at Xian and understood. The more the whirling world looked down on Xian, the happier Xian was. Xianchu said in a deep voice, "What are your plans next?" "As far as I know, the experts of the Xuanhuan sect are already on their way, and there are many of them. In addition, the Xuanji sect is also building a teleportation array." Speaking of this, she looked at Xian and said, "Originally, it was impossible for the Xuanji sect to build a teleportation array that can lead to the five-dimensional universe, because it is extremely difficult to come here from the whirling world. Even the experts of the consolidation realm can't easily come to this world. However, because of the Tao scripture, the major forces of the whirling world have united like never before. Their goal is not only the Tao scripture but also your universe." Xian said in a deep voice, "Resources?" Xianchu nodded and said, "If you want to develop, you must have resources. And your universe is a good target for the whirling world. In addition, because of the Tao scripture, The major forces of the Whirling World have helped the Xuanji sect build a teleportation array. What the Whirling World is after is not just the Tao scripture. Xian looked calm and did not speak. No one knew what he was thinking. Xianchu looked at Xian and said, "The current situation is that even if you hand over the Tao scripture, the Whirling World and the Dark Abyss will not let you go. Your five-dimensional universe, the Tao world, the six-dimensional universe, the doubting world and the celestial abyss, especially those top-grade mineral veins, are all coveted by them. Of course, the most important thing is the Tao scripture. You have 6 Tao scriptures, and in addition to the 2 from the Dark Abyss, you have a total of 8 Tao scriptures. They will go crazy." Xian said with a smile. "Xianchu, what are you trying to say?" Xianchu said in a deep voice, "I want your 6 Tao scriptures. If you give them to me, I can help you." Xian said with a smile, "How can I help?" Xianchu said, "As long as you give me the Tao scripture, whether it is the Dark Abyss or the Whirling World, my Whirling sect will help you deal with them." Xian looked at Xianchu and said, "The Whirling sect is that strong?" Xianchu nodded, "Yes." Xian said with a smile, "Xianchu, I trust you, but I don't trust the Whirling sect. Do you understand what I mean?" Xianchu frowned slightly. "Do you think I don't have the ability to make decisions?" Xian nodded. Xianchu's expression was calm. "If there are no accidents, I will be the next Whirling sect master." Xian shook his head. "Xianchu, you said it yourself. There are no accidents. Also, Miss Xianchu, I, Xian, will not put my fate in the hands of others. If I give you the Tao scripture and you suddenly ignore me, won't I be embarrassed?" Xianchu was silent. Xian said with a smile, "Miss Xianchu, I appreciate your kindness." After saying that, he turned and left. Xianchu looked at Xian in the distance and sighed softly. At this time, an old man appeared beside her and said in a deep voice, "Heavenly Venerable and Yuan contacted us. He asked if we are interested in joining forces." Xianchu shook her head. "I'm not interested." The old man frowned slightly. "Why?" Xianchu spoke softly, "Because I feel that something bad will happen if they target Xian like this." The old man spoke in a low voice. "You're talking about the people behind him?" Xianchu closed her eyes slowly. "So many people are bullying him, so those people definitely won't sit idly by." The old man hesitated for a moment before he said, "I know that the Blackout Sect, the Profound Secret School, the Shao Clan, and the Tao Return Institute have joined forces with Yuan this time. Their true objective isn't just Xian himself, it's the people behind him as well. If we don't participate now, then once Xian is defeated in the future, our Whirling sect won't have a share in the Tao scripture. Moreover, we might even be isolated by these powers. So now..." Xianchu suddenly looked at the old man. "Is this what the sect master wants?" The old man shook his head. "The sect master wants you and exalt you to make the decision." Xianchu spoke in a low voice. "When will master arrive?" The old man replied, "I don't know." Xianchu looked at the old man and the old man spoke in a low voice. "Exaltu has already stopped contacting me. She might have already arrived in the 5th dimension." Xianchu fell silent. The old man continued, "There's one more thing, and that is that the transmission array has already been completed under the alliance of several great powers. The Tao scripture is almost complete. Once it's completed, a large number of super experts will rush over to the 5th dimension. At that time Xian will..." He didn't continue. Xianchu spoke softly. "Their true objective is the people behind Xian and Moon Yanyan." The old man nodded. "And Yuan will also send a large number of experts to the 5th dimension. They only have one goal, and that is to force the power behind Xian to show themselves. Then they will be destroyed." Xianchu looked down at the 5th dimension and spoke softly. "Will they show themselves to help Xian?" The old man spoke in a low voice. "If they don't show themselves, Xian will definitely die. The 5th dimension will definitely be destroyed." At this moment the old man turned around. Behind them was a woman. "Senior Sister Lu." The old man glanced at Senior Sister Lu but didn't speak. In fact, they already knew that Senior Sister Lu was here. Xianchu looked at Senior Sister Lu. "Can you persuade Xian?" Senior Sister Lu was expressionless. "Why should I persuade him? Does he really think that the Yang family is easy to bully?" After saying this, she turned around and left. Xianchu frowned slightly. "Yang family? What family?" The old man shook his head. "Never heard of it." Xianchu was silent. Spirit Palace. On this day, senior sister Lu came to the spirit palace and found Ling. She looked at Ling. You can contact that little white fellow, right? Ling nodded. Senior sister Lu was expressionless. Contact her. Ling hesitated for a moment, then opened a box. Somewhere in the distant starry sky, the little white thing next to the azure-robed man suddenly stopped. She hurried to open a box. A moment later she suddenly lifted her head to look at Zhou Xian. Then she waved her little paw quickly. The green-robed man was silent. Beside him, the spear-wielding woman looked at the green-robed man. If you don't care, I will go back. The green-robed man shook his head. It's too late. We are too far away from him. Unless we shatter the starry sky. Even if we shatter the starry sky, it will still take a month. The spear-wielding woman raised her eyebrows slightly. So what? The green-robed man held the spear-wielding woman's hand and said softly, I will inform a few people. As his voice fell, he opened his palm and a ray of sword light suddenly shot up into the sky. The next moment the ray of sword light split into several rays of sword aura and disappeared in the starry sky. On the peak of an unknown mountain, a woman sat cross-legged on a boulder. Suddenly she opened her eyes. In the sky in front of her, the space was torn apart by a ray of sword aura. The woman opened her right hand and the ray of sword aura fell into her hand. When she saw the sword aura, the woman looked excited. You finally contacted me. As she said this, she frowned slightly. The five-dimensional universe? The dark abyss? I should have killed all these pieces of trash back then. As soon as she finished speaking, she suddenly drew her sword and slashed forward. With this slash, the space in front of her split open. In the next moment she turned into a ray of sword light and entered the pitch-black space. Soon after, a ray of sword light tore through the pitch-black space tunnel. On the other side, in an unknown galaxy, a woman slowly walked in a resplendent galaxy. The starry sky around her was dazzling, mysterious, and beautiful. This woman wore a white robe and there was a wine gourd hanging on her waist. At this moment the woman suddenly stopped. Not far in front of her, there was a black door floating in the air. The woman said softly, The cause of disaster. Brother, was it forced on you by others or is it your own? I will investigate clearly. As she said this, she walked towards the black door floating in the air. At this moment, a ray of sword aura suddenly appeared not far behind her. The woman turned around and opened her palm. The ray of sword aura fell into her palm. A moment later, the woman's expression suddenly became ferocious. Bandit Yang, if anything happens to him, I will fuse with that woman and blow your dog head off. After saying that, she suddenly threw a punch in front of her. Boom. Under this punch, the starry sky was destroyed and nothing existed. The next moment, a ray of white light tore through the pitch-black space. This was an unknown starry sky. In the starry sky there was a stone staircase that was millions of feet long. The stone staircase stood in the starry sky, and at the end of the stone staircase, there was a huge stone door. On the stone staircase, a swordsman wearing a cloud-white robe walked slowly. P.S. The college entrance examination is over. Tomorrow will be early. One vote is also love. Chapter 1426. Around them the starry sky was deathly silent. On the stone steps, swordsman was walking slowly and calmly. At the bottom of the stone steps, there was a sloppily dressed old man. The old man's hair was long and messy and at his waist there was a small black wine pot. At this moment this sloppy old man was staring at the swordsman on the stone steps. The stone steps were 990,000 zhang in total. 1 zhang was a Dao law, 1 zhang was a heaven and earth, 1 zhang was a whirling wind. The stone steps were the road and the stone door at the end was the legendary Dao gate. What was the Dao gate? According to legend, it was an inheritance left behind by the Dao scripture's owner. Once you enter the Dao gate you can obtain the Dao. After the Dao scripture's owner, no one had ever reached the Dao gate. Even the 4 disciples of the Dao scripture's owner did not. Not only that, they did not even reach half the distance. At this moment, swordsman was only 10,000 zhang away from the Dao gate. At this time the swordsman suddenly sped up. He walked faster and faster. The Dao law on the Dao path did not seem to have any effect on him. Seeing the swordsman suddenly speed up, the sloppy old man's pupils shrank, his eyes filled with disbelief. Soon the swordsman arrived in front of the Dao gate. The stone door slowly opened and a voice floated out from inside. Enter this door and you can obtain the Dao. The swordsman chuckled. Dao? Can you block my sword? With that he turned around and floated away. The stone door was empty and quiet. When the swordsman returned to the starting point, the sloppy old man suddenly said with a trembling voice, Your Excellency, why don't you go in and see? You can obtain the true Dao by entering this door. The swordsman did not look back. I am already invincible, why would I need to enter the Dao? The sloppy old man was petrified. At this time, the starry sky several hundred zhang in front of the swordsman suddenly split open, and a strand of sword qi floated out. The swordsman opened his palm and the strand of sword qi steadily fell in front of him. A moment later, the swordsman looked up into the distance and whispered, The 5-dimensional universe? At this point he turned to look at the sloppy old man. Can you do me a small favor? The sloppy old man hurriedly said, Senior, please speak. Senior. In fact, the sloppy old man felt rather complicated. How many years had it been? When had he ever called anyone senior? Swordsman smiled faintly. The son of an old friend has encountered some trouble in the 5th dimension. The people there are too weak, so I have no interest in going there. However, the son of an old friend is in trouble, so I have no choice but to help, so... The slovenly old man hurriedly said, This junior is willing to go and help. This was a great opportunity to form a good relationship. Why would such an expert seek his help? Such an opportunity was hard to come by even in 10,000 years. Swordsman nodded. Since you've done me a favor, I should also do you a favor. Tell me. The sloppy old man hurriedly bowed respectfully. Senior, please give me some pointers. Swordsman shook his head. I can't guide you. The sloppy old man was puzzled. Why? Swordsman chuckled. You are within the realm, but I am not. The sloppy old man was stunned. Not within the realm? Swordsman nodded. I don't have a realm. The sloppy old man, swordsman suddenly walked into the distance. The Dao is in the heart and you are the Dao. There is no need to become someone else's Dao. Since you have reached the end of the road, why not try another one? As he spoke, he had already disappeared at the end of the starry sky. At the same time, a voice came from the end of the starry sky. Actually, there is nothing wrong with being weak. At least you can taste the taste of defeat. At the stone steps, the sloppy old man was silent. After a long time, he respectfully bowed towards the distance. Thank you for your guidance. As he said this, he turned to look at the stone door with a complicated expression. Master, I finally know why you are disappointed in us. It turns out that you don't want us to follow your path. After saying this, he turned and left. Qingqing. On this day, a woman arrived at Qingqing. The woman wore a long white dress and was as beautiful as a fairy. As soon as she stepped into Qingqing, she attracted the attention of countless people around her. Although many people around her had lustful thoughts, no one dared to offend her. The woman slowly arrived at the Yi family. At this time, the Yi family had already declined. There were only a few people left in the entire Yi family. The woman walked towards the Yi family. At this time, a Yi family guard blocked in front of the woman. He glanced at the woman. You are? The woman smiled faintly, and in the next moment she had already disappeared. The guard was stunned. When the woman reappeared, she was already in the Yi residence. To be precise, she was in the small courtyard where Yi Xian and Yi Ling used to live. The woman looked around and smiled. Yi Xian. At this time, a weak voice sounded behind the woman. You are? The woman turned around. In front of her stood an extremely weak old man. The woman looked at the old man and did not speak. The old man said with a trembling voice, Do you know Yi Xian? The woman nodded. I do. The old man hurriedly asked, Is he dead? The woman shook her head. No. The old man was stunned. Then he fell to the ground. He's not dead yet. The woman looked at the old man. You're going to die. The old man smiled miserably. I know, the woman smiled. You want him to die? Why is that? The old man's expression suddenly became resentful. He killed my grandson and caused me to become like this. Do you think I shouldn't want him to die? The woman shook her head and smiled. So it's you. I heard that you forced him to leave the Yi family. The old man stared at the woman. He was never a member of the Yi family. The woman smiled. In your heart, you think that your grandson and the Yi family patriarch's position are the most important. But do you know that your so-called patriarch's position is nothing in his eyes? He was born in your Yi family. In fact, it was a great opportunity for your Yi family. If you had used this opportunity well, I believe that the fate of your Yi family would have been changed. Unfortunately, you forcibly turned this opportunity into an ill-fated relationship. The old man looked at the woman. What level has he reached now? Has he reached the Dharma realm? The woman blinked. Dharma realm. The old man stared at the woman. I heard that the strongest in the entire Azure province is the Dharma realm. Has he reached the Dharma realm? The woman smiled. He's probably tens of thousands of times stronger than the Dharma realm. With his current strength, he should be able to destroy your Azure province with a sneeze. Hearing this, the old man was stunned. Then, as if he had gone mad, he said, "Impossible. He can't be that strong." The woman ignored the old man. She turned around and looked around. Then she said softly, "This small place can't cultivate someone like him." With that, she slowly closed her eyes. Soon the surrounding space trembled. Seeing this, the old man's expression changed. He quickly retreated. "You." At this moment, the woman suddenly opened her eyes. She narrowed her eyes. "I can't find out. What kind of force is behind you?" A moment later, the woman turned around and left. Behind her, the old man said in a trembling voice, Who are you?" The woman smiled. "I come from the whirling world." You probably haven't heard of it. This time I came to the Yi family to see his past and then to see the woman behind him. Unfortunately, she didn't leave any information. However, it's not like I didn't gain anything. After saying that, she disappeared. Whirling world. In the field, the old man's eyes were filled with confusion. What was that place? The five-dimensional universe. Somewhere in the starry sky, the celestial venerable stood quietly. Behind her were the master and the earth venerable. On the right of the celestial venerable stood a middle-aged man. He was Li Qiuheng of the Xuanhuan sect. Opposite Li Qiuheng was a middle-aged man. This person was Yi Jun, whose body had been destroyed by Yi Xian. At this moment, an old man suddenly appeared in front of everyone. Li Qiuheng glanced at the old man and smiled. "So it's Elder Hu Bugui of the Dao Returning Academy." The old man called Hu Bugui said indifferently, "I heard that you're preparing to join forces to deal with the force behind Yi Xian?" The celestial venerable smiled. "Yes." Hu Bugui looked at the celestial venerable. "Count the Dao Returning Academy in." The celestial venerable smiled. "Welcome." Li Qiuheng suddenly looked at the celestial venerable. "Celestial venerable, is the force behind Yi Xian really that strong?" The celestial venerable said softly, "Everyone, there was a woman who appeared to help Yi Xian before, and she killed my third brother in the Dark Abyss Forbidden Area. My third brother is also at the Consolidation Realm and the other party is only a clone." Hearing this, everyone's expressions became solemn. A clone. A clone had killed a Consolidation Realm expert. The celestial venerable continued. "Also, you should already know that Yi Xian has the calamity cause, but he's still alive. If I'm not wrong, someone must be blocking the calamity cause for him." In the distance, Hu Bugui frowned. "What kind of force is it?" The celestial venerable shook his head. "I don't know, but I'm sure that it's definitely a very strong force." "Very strong?" Hu Bugui sneered. "Isn't that a little exaggerated?" The celestial venerable looked at Hu Bugui and smiled. "Can you kill a Consolidation Realm expert with a clone?" Hu Bugui fell silent. He couldn't. Hu Bugui looked at the celestial venerable. "But I don't think there are many experts of that level." The celestial venerable asked, "What if there are many?" Hu Bugui frowned. "How is that possible? Even in the whirling world there aren't many experts of that level." The celestial venerable smiled. "What if there are many?" At this moment Li Qiuheng suddenly said, "The celestial venerable is right, what if there are many? Even if there aren't many, what if there are 2 or 3? Hu Bugui fell silent. The celestial venerable smiled. "I, in Yuan, suffered a great loss because I underestimated him." As she said this, she looked down and said softly, "Everyone, if we want to destroy Yi Xian and obtain the Dao scripture, we must first take care of the people behind him. So this time everyone, don't hide it anymore. Call as many experts as you can." Hu Bugui frowned. "If we call too many experts, what if the people behind him are afraid and don't show up? Wouldn't it be a loss?" The celestial venerable said softly, "That's true. Chapter 1427. In the starry sky, Li Qiuheng said, "We can do this, call more experts, but let the consolidation realm experts hide in the dark. Once the people behind Yi Xian appear, we can annihilate them in one fell swoop." As he spoke, he glanced at the crowd. "What do you think?" Li Qiuheng smiled and said, "That's fine." As he spoke, he looked at the Celestial Venerate. "Celestial Venerate, what do you think?" After a moment of silence, the Empyrean said, "I feel that we shouldn't underestimate the people behind him. It's better to be safe than sorry." Li Qiuheng smiled and said, "I know Sky Sovereign's concerns. Therefore, just in case, my Black Illusion sect will send 6 Peak Consolidation Realm experts and 20 Dao Attainment Realm experts to the 5th dimension." Hu Bugue added, "The Dao Returning Academy will also send 6 Peak Unity Realm experts and 20 Dao Attainment Realm experts." As he spoke, he looked at Yi Jun. After a moment of silence, Yi Jun said, "I'll withdraw." "Quit." Everyone looked at Yi Jun. Yi Jun said indifferently, "Everyone, my Yi family isn't as strong as you all, so we won't get involved." With that, he turned around and left. Although the Yi family was not considered weak in the whirling world, it was not particularly strong either. He had initially sought out Yi Xian because he didn't know Yi Xian's background. However, after hearing the Heavenly Venerate's words, he realized that Yi Xian wasn't as simple as he seemed. Even the Dark Abyss needed to join forces with the whirling world. One could imagine how powerful the force behind Yi Xian was. At this time, if the Yi clan still wanted to participate, it would be very stupid. Moreover, even if he won in the end, the Yi family would not benefit at all because the Yi family was much weaker than the other forces. Therefore, no matter if they won or lost, the Yi family would not benefit from it. Leaving was the best choice. As for the grudge of having his body severed by Yi Xian, he no longer cared. It was good enough that he was alive. The others didn't say anything when they saw Yi Jun leave, nor did they try to persuade him to leave. The Yi family's strength was indeed nothing to them. Meanwhile, Li Qiuheng suddenly said, "What's the attitude of the Whirling Sect?" The Whirling Sect. Everyone looked at the Heavenly Exalt when they heard this. The Whirling Sect's attitude was extremely important because the Whirling Sect was known as the #1 sect in the whirling world. After all, the Whirling Sect possessed the last Dao scripture. Yet it was still standing. Just this alone was sufficient to prove how powerful the Whirling Sect was. The Empyrean said softly, "Their attitude is unclear. However, we can be sure that even if they don't help us, they will definitely not help Yi Xian." Li Qiuheng nodded. Although the Whirling Sect is strong, they will definitely not go against all of us just for Yi Xian. However, we have to be careful. If they really help Yi Xian, then the matter will be slightly troublesome. The Empyrean nodded. "I'll go see them again and probe their attitude." After that, she looked at Li Qiuheng. "When will Profound Theory Sect's teleportation array be completed?" Li Qiuheng said solemnly, 5 days at most." 5 days. The Heavenly Exalt nodded and said, "The Shao clan also participated in the construction of the teleportation formation, right?" Li Qiuheng nodded. "Not only the Shao clan but the Whirling Sect also participated." The Empyrean smiled. "It seems that you are very ambitious." Li Qiuheng smiled. "Since we're here, we naturally can't just bring along the Dao scripture. What do you say, Empyrean?" The Empyrean smiled. "Of course. You guys chat. I'll go see the 2 from the Whirling Sect and see what their attitude is." After that, she left with the Earth Venerable and the deceased master. Li Qiuheng looked at the 5th dimension below. "Let's get ready." After that, everyone left. The starry sky became quiet. Dao City inside the Sword Hall. Yi Xian and Guan Yin sat opposite each other. Venerable Mi was also beside Yi Xian. Yi Xian suddenly looked at Venerable Mi. "Are there many people coming recently?" Venerable Mi nodded. "In the 5th dimension, more and more mysterious experts are appearing. Most of them are from the whirling world." After that, he paused. "We must think of a countermeasure." Yi Xian nodded. "I know." After that, he looked at Guan Yin. "What's the overall situation in the 5th dimension?" Guan Yin said in a low voice, "There are no problems internally. But, if the whirling world and the Dark Abyss really join forces, then we—" Yi Xian was silent. Guan Yin said again, "No matter what, we cannot fight in the 5th dimension. Otherwise, it will cause a destructive blow to the 5th dimension." Venerable Mi sighed. "Their goal is the 5th dimension. Therefore they will definitely not place the battlefield elsewhere. Moreover, we are very passive. After that he looked at Zhou Xian. Sect Master, I feel that even if the ancient god Abyss helps us, we have no chance of winning. Moreover, if they pay too high a price they will most likely withdraw. Zhou Xian nodded. This time we can only rely on ourselves. Venerable Me wanted to say something but stopped. Zhou Xian said softly, based on the current situation we have no chance of winning. Am I right? Venerable Me said in a low voice, unless Miss Nian Nian regains her memory. Nian Nian. Guan Yin and Zhou Xian looked at Zhou Xian. The only thing that could save the fifth dimension now was Nian Nian. As long as Nian Nian regained her memory all the problems would be solved. But the problem was that Nian Nian showed no signs of recovering. Zhou Xian suddenly stood up and left. Inside the hall Venerable Me and Guan Yin looked at each other. Zhou Xian came to the starry sky and looked down at the fifth dimension. This was the place that Zhou Xian wanted to protect. But now, with the whirling world and the dark world joining forces, could he still protect this universe? As if thinking of something, he opened his palm and 6 scrolls of Dao scripture appeared in his hand. Yi Jiming suddenly said, "What's your plan? Hand it over?" Zhou Xian shook his head. It's useless to hand it over. Because their goal is not only the Dao scripture but also this universe. Yi Jiming said in a low voice, compared to the whirling world the fifth dimension and the doubting are too weak. As for the ancient god Abyss, as Venerable Me said, if they pay too much they will most likely retreat. Zhou Xian was silent. Yi Jiming said again, do you want to use this Dao scripture to make them kill each other? Zhou Xian shook his head. Impossible. Those people are not stupid. If I do that, I will only give away the Dao scripture for nothing. Yi Jiming said, whirling school? Zhou Xian still shook his head. The whirling sect is powerful but they only want my Taoist scripture. They won't really help me. Even if they help me they will only help me. They won't help the entire 5-dimensional universe. They will even give up the 5th dimension to ease the relationship with other forces. In short, they will not rely on others. Yi Jiming said in a low voice, can you contact the woman in the plain dress? Zhou Xian raised his head and looked into the depths of the starry sky. He could not sense the woman at all. Yi Jiming said in a low voice, this time is not like before. If the difference in strength between us is too great, the 5th dimension might become chaotic. Zhou Xian nodded. This was also the problem he was most worried about. If the whirling world and the dark world joined hands, the 5th dimension would not be able to resist. In this situation many experts in the 5th dimension might collapse. But this was normal because the difference in strength between the two sides was too great. Yi Jiming said, what are your plans? Zhou Xian was silent. After a while he looked at the Dao scripture in his hand. This Dao scripture was a hot potato. Actually, if it was only because of the Dao scripture, it would be easy to deal with. But the problem was not only the Dao scripture. The whirling world built the teleportation array to invade this universe and take it for themselves. As if he thought of something, Yi Xian squinted his eyes. Teleportation array. Yi Jiming said solemnly, if the teleportation array can't be built, then the whirling world won't pose much of a threat to us. If there is only dark abyss, then ancient god Abyss won't have to sacrifice too much and the situation will become advantageous to us. Of course, the prerequisite is to stop them from building the teleportation array. Yi Xian suddenly kept the Dao scripture and came to Seven's room. Yi Xian said solemnly, Seven, I want you to help me find someone. Seven looked at Yi Xian. Who? Yi Xian said a few words and moments later, Seven got up and left. Hold on until I return. After saying that, she turned into a streak of sword light and disappeared. At the entrance of the room, Yi Xian raised his head and looked at the sky. I will try my best. After saying that, he disappeared. Soon Yi Xian found Xianchu because he had to ask Xianchu to know the coordinates of the teleportation array built by Xuanji sect. Xianchu looked at Yi Xian. You want to destroy the teleportation array? Yi Xian nodded. Xianchu shook his head. Impossible. That teleportation array was built by a few major forces. Moreover, my whirling sect also participated in it. It's definitely not something you can destroy. Yi Xian smiled. I still want to try. Xianchu fell silent. Yi Xian asked again, can I? After a moment of silence, Xianchu said, it's in the starry sky 120,000 li south of here. That's the coordinates chosen by Xuanji sect. They didn't expect you to destroy the teleportation array so you can try. Yi Xian cupped his fists. Thank you. After saying that, he got up and was about to leave. Xianchu suddenly said, even if you destroy the teleportation array, you'll only buy some time. And they won't give up. Yi Xian said softly, all I need is some time. As soon as he finished speaking, he vanished. Xianchu frowned slightly. What did he mean? Yi Xian didn't swagger off. Instead, he left Dao City stealthily and arrived at a starry sky according to Xianchu's directions. This starry sky was the teleportation coordinates chosen by Xuanji sect. Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes, and it didn't take long for the spatial Dao law to appear between his brows. A short while later, Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes and looked into the distance. The space there was 300 m away was the coordinates chosen by Xuanji sect because he'd sensed a mysterious force there. Yi Xian was about to attack when a voice resounded from behind him. If you dare to attack, you'll die right now.